Okay, everyone, welcome to the Asheville City Council meeting. I was just getting the okay that we're ready to go. If you could just take a moment to silence your cell phones. And also, I think most of you have seen, we have a table for people to sign up out in the hall to sign up to speak tonight, and it will populate on our screens in front of us. If you could please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we begin our agenda tonight, I'll read the chamber decorum statement. Members of the public attending council meetings or addressing the council shall abide by the following rules. Everyone shall follow the instructions of the mayor or any other presiding officer or official and shall refrain from impeding or interrupting the conduct of business. This shall include, but not be limited to, clapping, yelling, or other audio expressions of approval or disapproval of comments made during the meeting. Persons addressing council are expected to observe the decorum of the chamber, to be respectful of the council and the public, to refrain from the use of profanity or foul language, to refrain from personal attacks and commentary on candidates for political office, and to refrain from making disclosures prohibited by the Personnel Privacy Act with respect to any city employee. Failure to abide by these rules may subject you to removal from the council chamber. All right, first we have one proclamation this evening, and let me just look at my agenda here. I see that Brent Bailey and Brent, whoever else you have with you, please bring up and meet me down at the lectern.
Just me.
It's just me.
Just you. And this is the Fair Chance Hiring Week proclamation. Whereas every year, more than 600,000 individuals are released from state and federal prisons, and 9 million are released from municipal or county jails, with many seeking to rebuild their lives and contribute meaningfully to their communities. And whereas approximately 1 in 3 American adults, 70 million people, have a criminal record, representing a substantial and often overlooked segment of our potential workforce. And whereas employment is the single most important factor in reducing recidivism, with formerly incarcerated individuals who maintain employment for 1 year post-release experiencing only a 16% recidivism rate over 3 years, compared to 52% for those who remain unemployed. And whereas hiring formerly incarcerated individuals provides significant benefits to employers, with 85% of human resource leaders and 81% of business leaders reporting that second chance hires perform the same or better than other employees. And whereas formerly incarcerated employees demonstrate higher loyalty and longer tenure, with research showing they're less likely to quit their jobs voluntarily than other workers, resulting in reduced employee turnover and recruitment costs. And whereas employing 100 formerly incarcerated individuals increases their lifetime earnings by 55 million, generates 1.9 million in income tax contributions, and produces 770,000 in sales tax revenues, while saving millions of dollars annually by keeping them out of the criminal justice system. And whereas 93% of formerly incarcerated individuals between the ages of 25 and 44, those in their prime working years, are actively working or looking for work, demonstrating strong labor force participation. And whereas many industries experiencing severe worker shortages, including construction, manufacturing, accommodation, and food services, retail trade, and administrative support services could benefit from tapping into this motivated workforce. And whereas communities benefit when people with criminal records find meaningful employment through decreased poverty rates, strengthened families, and reduced crime. Now therefore, I, Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim April 12th through 18th, 2026 as Fair Chance Hiring Week in Asheville, and encourage all employers workforce development agencies, community organizations, and citizens to recognize the value and potential that formerly incarcerated individuals bring to our workforce and work together to create a more inclusive economy that offers opportunities for all members of our community to contribute, thrive, and succeed.
Yeah, I just want to thank the city for the proclamation and acknowledging this, and also being a leader in offering those employment opportunities for those with criminal backgrounds. Many supervisors and managers report these are some of their most dependable and best employees. And so if we really believe that while people are incarcerated, they're having opportunities to rehabilitate themselves, it's an opportunity, it behooves us as a community to provide people once they are released. So once again, thank you all for getting behind this. We appreciate it. Oh, I'm Brent Bailey, and I'm the coordinator of the local reentry council here in Buncombe County. Thank you. It's a job fair Thursday at the Ag Center if you know somebody looking for work.
Okay, period. Didn't you say Thursday?
He did. He said job fair at the Ag Center Thursday. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our proclamations. We have removed item D from the agenda tonight. That was a resolution authorizing the city manager to apply for, accept, and sign all of the appropriate application and acceptance documents for the community project funding award allocated to the city of Asheville as secured through Congressman Chuck Edwards' office and managed through the Department of Justice Office of Justice Programs. This item, what I think we're going to do is bring this item back down to the public, to Policy and Finance Committee, which will meet 2 weeks from today, which is April 28th, here in this room at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 3:30, I don't know. We're going to have a time that we know that we're meeting, so that we can hear a lot more information about this item and get full information for us and for the community to hear about it. We hear a lot of questions and concerns about this funding item, and we want to make sure that we address everyone's questions and fully understand this item before taking any action on it. If the council decides, and one of the reasons we're bringing it to the Policy Finance Committee is that's a full subcommittee of council. Everyone on council sits on it. And if it were to move forward at that point, it would go to council in a May agenda. This issue in particular is very important to cities right now, especially in light of what we're experiencing on a national level and federally. And I know a lot of cities around the nation are grappling with real-time intelligence center issues. So I think it warrants a full conversation before moving ahead. So with that, council, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda without item D. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right. That's not Maggie. Okay. All right, our pitch hitter, okay. All right, I have a motion and a,
I do have a request since we're rescheduling this for the Policy and Finance Committee. I think one of the things that I've learned in our conversation in the community for the past 6 weeks as this has been bubbling up is that our neighbors were not aware that we use surveillance technology already and what it would mean to synchronize it. So if we could bring to Policy and Finance what some of the anticipated costs are beyond fiscal year 1, and then also a conversation, something about like flock cameras and how they're currently used, what our policies are around them would be helpful.
And if there's any follow-up steps to be taken as a part of the funding.
okay. Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda without item D. We do have 2 people signed up to speak under this item, and you'll each have 3 minutes to speak. The first person is Paul Howell, and while Mr. Oh, did you want to speak on item D? We're not, if you would like, oh, you do, it does say item, I'm sorry, never mind, we're not doing that item, I apologize. Okay, we don't have anyone signed up to speak under the consent agenda, that's not item D. So,
Can I make a comment about one of the?
yes,
things?
please.
I just want to highlight item F as in Fred. That's the memo of understanding between the Housing Authority and APD to provide services to those properties once again. This has been a long time, it's been a long time ask of the Housing Authority, both from the leadership and residents. So I'm very happy that we're finding a way to provide them with the safety that they've been requesting for years.
That is great, I think. Oh, I'm sorry, please, we can't have people speak out of order. We're doing the consent agenda right now. If you would like to sign up to speak, anyone, if you would like to sign up to speak, just make your way into the hall and you can sign up to speak and address the council. Thank you.
Is he saying under public comment he did?
I don't see Curry on that list.
Yeah.
Oh, it looks like it's every single item, D, sign up, has been moved to the general comment at the end of the meeting. So your name is number 6 in line during general public comment at the end of the meeting.
What time is that expected?
Okay, at the end of the agenda, we will take all general public comment. And
Including Paul?
well, Paul said, yeah, he said he wanted to. Okay, I don't know. So we'll move as quickly as we can to get there. All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have concluded the consent agenda. We have a couple of presentations and reports. The first is the state of the airport, and the executive director, Lou Blywise, is here. Welcome, Mr. Blywise.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, rest of the City Council. I appreciate that. You have electronic versions, and you have also been passed out, hopefully, a hard copy of our annual report summarizing operational issues for 2025. With that, air service for 2025, we have 6 airlines: Allegiant, American, Delta, JetBlue, Sun Country, and United. We had 27 nonstop destinations out of Asheville. We lost Baltimore and Washington, but we added Washington and Dulles. And Delta added Boston, which is something that we already had. From a passenger perspective, we had a total of 2,240,877 passengers. That was up 3.1%, and it is the second highest total of passengers coming out of the airport, flying to the community you're from. Seats in the market were down 1.5% for a total of 1,389,600. Load factor was down 4.09% for a total of 78.39% load factors on all the airplanes. From an operations standpoint, we had 32,993 airline operations, which is up 3.8%. And general aviation and military was down 10.6% for a total of 40,533. We also, during the course of 2025, unveiled our new branding and logo for the airport and the marketing materials that all go with that. From a construction standpoint, in 2025, we opened the North Concourse, ticketing, and the temporary checkpoint. Completed the FAA control tower from a construction standpoint, did some interior perimeter roads, and demoed some general aviation hangars in making room for additional overnight aircraft parking for commercial aviation. Total spent in 2025 was $126.2 million. Community events that we had, of course, our runway 5K, we did earn about $38,000 net for that. We split those proceeds up to various organizations, one being AB Tech Aviation Foundation of $15,000. Another one was WNC Pilots Association Foundation for another $15,000. Our charitable partner is Big Brothers Big Sisters. The course of the year, we provided them $6,000. And lastly, this was a one-off, But because of the government shutdown throughout the year, that had a major impact on our TSA workers at the airport. We provided $2,000 to mount a food bank because they assisted our federal TSA workers during that time. We had pause for passengers, AVL Gives, which is our own internal charitable contribution program of over $12,000. We did 2 blood drives. We had 2 Blue Ridge Honor Air flights, recognizing our veterans, taking them up to DC. Music in the airport and our art in the airport program, which started with the new terminal again, and we highlighted those artists that were hurt and devastated from Hurricane Helene. From an economic impact, our number stays steady at $3.85 billion for Western North Carolina. We're currently undertaking with the Division of Aviation another economic impact study that will be out in January. Our financials for the year, from an operating revenue standpoint, we had $29.6 million. From an operational expense standpoint, we had $17.6 million, netting us $12 million. Our assets in 2025 at the end of the year, $357,631,170, which is up $43.3 million from the previous year. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you for Lou, I do want to say the new terminal is very nice.
It's
So,
absolutely.
Thank you
yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Wait till the second half.
Yeah, something about baggage. Okay, our second report for tonight is the manager's report, and I'll turn it over to Manager Wesley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to actually pass it off to my colleagues, Brad Branham and Dawa Hitch. who will give an update.
Okay, Brad.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's nice to see all of your faces from this angle for a change. I appreciate that. As was already said, this evening I'm going to be joined by our Communications and Public Engagement Director, Dawa Hitch. And we're going to be talking to you about digital accessibility, specifically a fairly significant change that the city, in conjunction with all local governments and state governments around the country, are about to make. It's going to represent a pretty expansive and significant change in the way that the public accesses the current information that we put out digitally, be it on our websites, be it through social media pages and our apps. All of this is going to be operationalized in a way that Dawa Hitch is going to explain to you in more detail this evening, but hopefully you will get the underlying goal that the city staff have put forward, which is to ensure that we remain legally compliant with some new regulations on us, while also continuing to strive for the level of transparency that we hold so important for our community. Why are we doing this? Well, in 2024, about this time of year, the Department of Justice and the federal government issued a ruling that said, going forward, all state and local governments must become fully digitally accessible for those individuals with disabilities. And that specifically applied to digital offerings, including web pages and mobile apps. This is something that city staff have been working on to become compliant in for the last 2 years. The deadline for the city of Asheville is actually next Friday, the 24th. This rule, as I mentioned, is going to affect the appearance, the usability, and the function of all city websites, our social media pages, as well as our city apps. In addition, it's going to affect any of the pages that we have linked to those materials. So it's a very broad scope. The general rule says that if we put it out digitally, it must be accessible. And accessible is defined under the American with Disability Act standards. There are some limited exceptions to this, but they are limited in scope. So you're not going to hear much about us utilizing these exceptions except in extreme circumstances, primarily not only because they are thin, but because our goal is to actually provide this material in an accessible format so that everyone can access it. The most common one that you will likely see some of our material being placed under what is called an archived exception. This really just refers to older materials used for records and research that's not updated. So it does allow us under the new rule to have some of our material go into these archived areas. And you'll hear a little more about that when Dawa comes up here. I do want to highlight an important part of the final rule, which is that there were specific consequences included by the Department of Justice for any non-compliance. They include not only enforcement actions by the Department of Justice, but the ability of private individuals to file lawsuits against the local government to seek compliance, compensatory damages, and also attorney's fees. And the last of those is one that we concern ourselves with because it may incentivize law firms to seek out any violations that they can file lawsuits against. With that being said, I'm going to stay just up here with you and continue to answer any questions that you've got during this process, but I want to hand it over to the far more apt Dowa Hitch to take it on and show you how we're planning on operationalizing all of this.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. Dowa Hitch, it's my pleasure to be in front of you this evening to share with you what this will look like in practice. So just for a little bit of background, this ruling came down and work began on it not long before Helene hit. And so we all know that same team that was responding to the communication needs during that time, as well as building the new Asheville Recovers website and then into our recovery, is also the same team that's been working on this project as well. And they've been putting all their time and energy into how can we be creative and accessible while also minimizing any risk that we're exposing the city to. So that's just a little bit of background. What you're going to see here today is really oriented towards this April 24th date, next Friday. Again, so that we're minimizing that risk. And I think as Brad shared, there's a lot of unknowns out there about how some pieces of this ruling are going to be interpreted. And we are going to have our ears and eyes open for that and be as agile as we can. If there are things that links may be removed or something that just makes it to have an extra step to getting to the information. So I just want to assure everybody this is no done deal as we walk through this, but we're going to continue learning and then opening up to be as accessible as we can, both for people that are differently abled and those who are not. So I did want to anchor us all into the people factor. You know, what's behind this ruling is people having access to decision-making, materials, and 16% of the global population experiences a significant disability. And there are lots of categories of people who are differently abled. There's physical, sensory, cognitive, emotional, developmental, and how they interact with information is different in each of those categories. And so this is an effort, again, to make sure that people can have access to the decisions, programs, and activities of their, in our case, local government. I might have just jumped in. I'm not sure if I introduced myself. I think Brad did, but again, I'm Dowa Hitch and I serve as the Communication and Public Engagement Director. So this ruling touches a lot of things that we all interact with daily. Web pages, our public input platforms, software applications, and websites, our YouTube videos, social media platforms, documents, archived materials, slides, presentations, forms, and specifications. So it is material that people need to access to be able to do their work, right? If you're in construction, you may need some specifications that the city has posted on the website. If you are participating in decision-making, we want to make sure you've got access to the materials that are informing the decision. So those components are important with how we've mapped out a path forward. There's challenges, even coming from two different federal agencies. So here's an example. We've got conflicting federal requirements. We've got our community development block grant disaster recovery funds that require posting of reports that HUD generates. Those reports that HUD generates that they require us post are not accessible. So we are having these conversations, you know, how do we navigate through this, minimizing the risk to the city, and as we talk to our colleagues across the country, which we do, as we are involved in webinars from ICMA and others, all cities are experiencing these challenges of some of these conflicting requirements. Another challenge is our sincere desire to meet community expectations for transparency and accessibility. Then there's also the cost and time required to remediate documents so that they are accessible, or they meet the accessibility requirements. So this is an accessible slide deck. And what I'm going to do now is talk with you a little bit about what's going to look different, so that people can understand the why behind this and what the opportunities are moving forward. So when we're talking about city websites and our public input platform, there may be less content. That's not, I think there's been some misunderstanding out in the community about what that could mean. If there is information that is anecdotal, we've got a lot of web pages that aren't visited often. They're kind of, their legacy from projects that, closed out many years ago. We're going through and doing a cleanup to make sure that we can just manage all of the information that's out there. Our website is huge. There will be a record of anything that comes down that people will be able to see. So if they would like that information that's no longer in a digital format, we can still get that information to them. I think that's a really important piece of this. I think Brad mentioned that there will now be archived sections of the website. So you will see there will still be linked information, documents in that archive section, but it will be clearly noted so that people, for example, that are using machine readers, they understand that as they come to that information, and it will be clear to them. And again, there are specifications about what information can be archived. And just to paraphrase a bit of what Brad said, or maybe just to put this in plain language, if things are being used currently to access programs or perhaps in decision-making, we're going to have to look harder at whether or not they can be put in an archived section. So again, we just want to be upfront about that. There will be a path of anything that you can't link to that you used to be able to just open a link and the document popped up. And we've got a pathway for people to provide feedback on if there's anything that's not there that they loved, and we'll be working to remediate documents and get those things up as quickly as we can. Consistency in forms, we've got a lot of forms on the website, so hopefully get the people there, and they ran all over the place. Some were forms you had to print off and fill out. Some were using software that is not accessible, so we now have consistency across the website with an accessible form tool, and that's a project that the team's been working on to get us to where we are today. There will also be fewer links to outside web pages. There's part of this ruling, and Brad, you can feel free to jump in, but we are also limited to what we are linking to, and what we're linking to needing to be accessible. So we'll talk a little bit more about what that'll look like in practice too, but just wanted to note that so there's no surprise. Master plans, what the plan is right now is that they will be named, it will be clear that they are available, but until we can get those remediated, they will likely be removed. And the thinking behind that is we're still using many of our master plans to inform decisions that are being made from this dais and on a programmatic level. There will be accessibility statements made throughout the websites, committing our commitment to meeting those requirements. And there will be some technical documents, for example, that are still available. They'll have descriptive statements, and again, pathways to support. If somebody has a disability where they can't read it, we want to make sure they're getting the personal support that they need, so that we are putting our time, our staff time, in areas that is most important for those who have the greatest need. So YouTube. We've got a pretty strong YouTube subscriber following, and what I want to share here is that part of this requirement means that all videos must have improved closed captioning and audio descriptions added. So I want to be clear, meetings will continue to be streamed, but there will be a lag before they're posted to allow for remediation. So that's posted externally to the website. There'll be a little bit of a lag. We're working through the contract right now to have those remediated. So our April 28th meeting will be an example where there'll be a little bit of lag. You know, normally Dan and Logan, they stay here late. They produce this meeting, they stay here late. They can get that uploaded back up to the website and it's available quickly. There will be a lag to allow for that.
What type of lag?
What's that?
Days, hours?
Days, well, no, yeah, probably days is what we're looking at. And it depends on the length of the meeting, for example, and the complexity of the material. All right, so something else that will look different, just to be able to manage the YouTube as an accessible resource. Past videos that were on YouTube will be taken down and they will be listed on the website. So you will still be able to access them under the archived material exception that we have, but they'll be in separate spaces because we can't get into the back end of YouTube and give all of the disclaimers that we need to give about what's accessible and what isn't. So we will be building back towards an accessible YouTube through the remediated videos that we're doing. But here in this moment where we're having to remediate and we want to keep putting things up, people will need to come to the website and we'll create as clear a path as we can so they know that, so that they can access past videos.
Quick question for you, Dawa. When I can't watch a committee, or when I can't attend a committee meeting, I often watch it preemptive to the council meeting to follow along. Is this only public facing? Is it possible that council will still get the videos? Okay, that's great, thank you.
You got it. That's the fourth bullet right there. Anticipate that that's a question, and it's a question for staff too as we go through our day-to-day work meeting to be able to go back and look at those videos. So of course minutes will be available. Another option that we're looking at is, can we run the video transcriptions right after the meeting, so the video transcriptions could be available and we can get those into an accessible format for external facing. And yes, council we can share, because we're not posting it externally, links to council meetings, council committee meetings, recovery board meetings, and planning meetings are what we're talking about prioritizing here in the short term. I appreciate all these questions, that there's a lot to wrangle in this unfunded mandate and ensure. So slide decks and presentations, I alluded to this a little bit, they will look different. They are oriented towards being readable for people that use machine readers. So you'll see here, this is the 5th slide that says what will look different. It's important to note that it's the 5th slide for anybody that's relying on a reader. So there's some things you'll see there. There will be likely less content on slides. There'll be limited colors and font sizes, fewer complex images. And I did want to share that presenters will receive training to provide clear descriptions of images, such as charts and diagrams and site plans. So you'll see more of that. That helps us get things remediated quicker when people are talking about what they're showing, so people perhaps that have different abilities can also follow along. So that will be something that's different. There will also likely, there are technical drawings and things that also need to be displayed, and so we're working through what a solution looks like for that, so that we can still get the videos remediated quickly, but we're not limited by the content and the complexity of that content. If you just think about all the site plans that you all see, or the plats, or whatever that comes before you that's technical in nature. So working through a solution for those as well. Software applications and partner websites. The Asheville app is going to be replaced. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I know it is a beloved tool, but that company does not intend to come into compliance. And it's been a great team working on this between the city attorney's office, communication and public engagement, IT, having to work with all of these software platforms to make sure that they're coming into compliance, and not everybody's going to. So our short-term solution, so we've got an RFP out, we're gonna choose a new product that closes tomorrow, the 14th, and we're gonna have an interim solution until we can get that new product up and running, and we're building that off of the way we handled incoming needs during Helene. So we'll be managing that on the back end of our public input platform where people can still use QR codes and things like that. So it's an imperfect solution. It's an interim solution. We'll certainly be sharing how people can access that, but that's the plan for the Asheville app until we can get the new product up and running.
So since the deadline for compliance is next Friday, does that mean the Asheville app will be gone by next Friday? Okay.
Well, we're going to get through this presentation, but first of all, there is some murmuring that the feds will somehow suspend this deadline because no city is getting this whipped into shape in this time. And the unbelievable radical change in the way that you provide information and interface is pretty overwhelming. I mean, Dawa's sort of soft pedaling it, but like basically we're not going to have pictures in slide decks anymore.
Well, you can. You'll just have to have alt text and they'll need to be explained.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very important
It's
initiative
big.
in some respects, but I think there are a lot of cities that are not choosing to take these steps this quickly, this fast, because there are so many challenges around it, and there's so much loss of information for the community, as easily accessible as it is right now for people. So, you know, we can get to that discussion at the end, and I don't know what the options are. I know that if you don't comply, there's always a risk someone will file a lawsuit. But on the other hand, I mean, the change is really dramatic. I mean, to be sitting here today talking about taking the Asheville app offline in a week is like, that's
Alarming.
For me, it's personally alarming.
It is.
They're all going to email you.
Well, there's that, but also I use it. You know, I think, let's finish the
Yeah.
presentation and then let's have that conversation.
And I just appreciate the comments about the magnitude of this. It's been an enormous thing to wrangle. And yes, again, so another thing, there will be a probable pause on the Water Smart customer usage data
Which we
dashboard.
literally just rolled out.
And then for now, links to non-city boards will be removed. And again, that's because of the accessibility of their content. What we can do is provide email information. So these are boards that maybe council appoints people to, but that we don't manage and run. So again, we're finding every way that we can continue the connection and then still minimize the risk for not being in compliance. So this is an ongoing project. I mentioned that in the beginning. We will be doing we do already, and we'll continue to do regular compliance scans of the city's websites. We will be remedying documents, and part of that will be based on requests and budgets. And then initial document scans by our department staff and trained accessibility partners in other departments will be made as we kind of transition into this new space where we're posting accessible documents from the beginning. So again, there's kind of two categories: things that we're still using. Those need to be remediated. We're using them to make decisions or perform programs. There's stuff in the past that's archived, that's all good. And then there's the things that we're going to be designing, producing here in the future, and they need to be accessible to be able to be posted. So the ruling does have widespread impacts on the city's digital communications. Every effort is being taken to minimize litigation risks while maintaining transparency and access to information. And there are initial adjustments that will likely evolve as more interpretations of the ruling become available. And our North Star is that we're clear about things that have come down, any documents that are not accessible, it will be noted. So again, we're being as transparent as we can be.
Dawa, I just wanted to start with some appreciation because this does not feel like good news on its face. But as a fellow with the new Disabled South Rising, I realized that coming into compliance with ADA is so important for our community. I think of Gary Ray, who I serve with on the transit committee. I've had the opportunity to serve with 4 blind members of our community on transit committees over the years. And the number of times that staff would hand out a paper handout and ask us to vote on that item was a shame, because we were missing out on the opportunity to make those documents accessible. And you kind of slid it in there, unfunded mandate, which means we're required to come into compliance quickly, and there's not the support for staff to do it. So with that in mind, it feels a lot like what I'm hearing in the community, like if one of my students' parents told them to clean up their room, and so they threw all the Legos in the trash. No, it's like we need to put the Legos away. And I hear you saying it's gonna take time, and we're gonna get there, but that some parts will be missing. And so I'm concerned about the backlog we have of open records requests, how long it's taking for members of our community to understand how we do the people's work. I'm concerned about what it means for us to like uphold the part of democracy where the press is able to tell the story of how our government works. I'm concerned about us being able to make good decisions when we can't access documents, which is already kind of a problem. Like I've requested multiple times to get documents about the budget presentations we've done so I can put together the pieces and make informed decisions. But as my colleague mentioned, I review the archive YouTube videos of our Housing Recovery Board, of old Urban Forestry Commission meetings to understand how we got where we are. So can you help me understand, because the Buncombe County Special Collections is archiving all of the municipal websites in the county with a Wayback, why we wouldn't partner with the county to hold some of the container while we move quickly?
And there's nothing that says we can't. It's certainly something that we can explore. And I think the important thing for us is to make sure we really understand what the need is, so that we're taking our staff resources and doing things that are meeting the need. And so, because of course the county is also going to be under the same obligations that we are with this ruling. So it's certainly something that we can explore, happy to explore that, and if always welcome for feedback to make sure we really understand what the need is so that we can prioritize things that may be going over to the archive and those things being the greatest need. So that's certainly something that we can explore and look into.
And then my second question is, peer cities in North Carolina. What are we looking at to say, okay, there's an exception on purpose because we know that we asked you to do something that's very labor intensive and quickly. Are there some areas where we can like unite across and say like, okay, the YouTube channel is just gonna take more time and we're all gonna agree that we're gonna fix it, but it's gonna take more time? Are there other ways that we can build coalition across the state to meet compliance and accessibility without ultimately ending up with inaccessibility?
And I'll let Brad speak to this too, but I can say that when we're talking to our peers across the country, people are handling. They are interpreting the ruling in many different ways. That is absolutely true. So all of our networks of other communication and engagement directors and staff, everybody's talking about this. And I will. It's happening in the IT department too. And I will say this: when we're talking to software, the folks we have software platforms with and our other colleagues in both of those disciplines, what we're hearing is, wow, you guys are ahead of most. And as behind as we feel, that's encouraging. But just to give you an idea of where people are kind of all over the board on how they are interpreting this. But I'll let the city attorney talk about interpretations.
I wanted to make sure we weren't becoming so risk averse that we actually make more staff work with a huge backlog of open records requests.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councilmember Roney. I think that is really the thrust of what the city is doing. But I'll add to that and say that, as I mentioned at the opening of the presentation, our edict with staff has been to try to do what needs to be done to bring us into compliance, but to try to minimize the hit to any sort of transparency, openness, or availability. This is supposed to all be about accessibility, and we don't simply want it to trade one person's accessible rights for another. So that has really been at the top of our minds. As Dowell mentioned, I've also been in communication with the city attorneys from around the state on this, attended seminars myself and training sessions on this, as has everyone in my office. We've been trying to learn about this, but quite frankly, we're facing a very great unknown ahead of us because this is a new rule nationwide. There have been no court interpretations about any of this yet. So the way that everyone is going about implementing it is going to be necessarily somewhat different because no one yet knows what it means to be fully compliant. And therein lies the risk. What we're trying to do is to become as compliant as we can without losing anything. What I think Dawa has tried to explain is that in the transition, you're going to see the rockiest days first before it gets better. It'll be darkest before the dawn. And because that initial transition will require us to really start the process from day one, all this has been in the works, but we're going to have to make a lot of changes, and then slowly we're going to be bringing things back, prioritizing those things that are most needed by the community. And then when we look at this thing in 6 months, a year, it'll look much, much better than it will on day one for us. We truly believe that. But in terms of how much risk we want to take on, the problem that we have from the legal perspective is it's very difficult for us to put a value on how risky it is at this point. Without, again, any lawsuits having yet been filed, we don't know exactly how hard court systems or the Department of Justice are going to be on this. What I do know is that there are law firms around the country that have actually already purchased software programs that allow them to sit in their office and go online and search everyone nationwide's websites to find violations. And that they are ramping up right now to file lawsuits because they're able to gain attorney's fees from that. And that's what we're concerned about from the risk standpoint.
Thank you.
You know, I get that there is risk and there's going to be law firms fishing for opportunities to file lawsuits, and we've certainly, you know, been on the receiving end of that under different topics. But, you know, I have a lot of heartburn about taking any of our archived information offline, any of the YouTube videos that are out there. I don't like taking the Asheville app offline without a solid replacement ready to go. I mean, it's, you know, and I think we're making great strides going forward to make modifications to the information that we have. I mean, not you, the clerk, but the clerk and I were talking today about how apparently we're going to be using e-signatures on all of our resolutions going forward because that they will be compliant. So I won't actually sign it. She promised me she won't put my signature on anything that I don't see and approve, which seems a little odd to me that, you know, things like that. But personally, I would not like to see us make changes like that where people who are used to interacting with the city by looking at our YouTube channel, at our videos, or looking up information on our website or using our Asheville app, to make those kinds of changes, we need a greater transition time. And so I would like to not see that happen by Friday, or what is this Friday or next Friday? Yeah, I mean, you know, so how long has this been a mandate, an unfunded mandate?
The ruling came down April 24th, 2024. So local governments have been planning for this essentially for 2 years now.
When you say the ruling, you mean?
The Department of Justice issued the ruling that this was now a requirement at that point.
So we got 2 years? Yeah, and since there is so much ambiguity about how to interpret it, I don't know, it seems counterintuitive to me that you would take offline historic YouTube videos so no one can have access to them. It doesn't, I'm not totally.
Let me just a bit of clarity about the videos. The videos will be on the website. Links to the videos will be on the website.
The City of Asheville's website.
The City of Asheville's website, yep. So what we were talking about is the YouTube channel, which we can't provide all of the disclaimer information that we need to about the materials being archived. We just don't.
So the disclaimer information's on our website. You hit the link and it takes you to YouTube?
Yes. So it's just a more circuitous way to get to those videos, and then they'll all be listed so you can see what they are. It's just we're limited at the accessibility requirements, the way we organize information about what's archived and what's not on our YouTube station. And so as they become remediated, then they can be moved back to the YouTube channel, but they will be linked on the website. And yes, it will take you to a YouTube video, but it will clearly say this is archived material.
So what does that mean for, like, I don't know, a committee meeting this week? Are we gonna be compliant moving forward? Are we gonna just keep it our current practices and have to remediate the new ones? It seems like we would,
Yeah, we'll be remediating the ones after the deadline. So we're still in this little spot now where we're running, we're still posting things on the YouTube channel for 2026. So all of 2026 is where we're starting with the remediation of those.
oh, to be
So-
clear, let's say that there's a housing and community development meeting coming up the first week of May. Will it be compliant?
Yes, so that there is where it will be streamed live, and then we can run the transcripts from it while it's being remediated. And once it's remediated, then it will be posted to the YouTube channel.
Okay, thank you.
I got another question, it's probably for you, Doa. On the Asheville app, I guess,
Yeah,
so in a week, you're gonna shut it off. And we don't know when a replacement will come online.
no,
Really
because
dislike that.
and that's just the
And-
truth. Trying to negotiate with the platform provider got us to this point, and then we got to a point where we're like, we gotta make a decision, because this is an important.
But
Yeah.
we
But we've
are,
had
we
2
have
years to
issued
prepare.
the RFP for the new provider, so that's closing, I think, today.
Tomorrow.
And so we are well in the process of selecting the replacement provider. So in consultation with our IT department, we believe that the gap is not going to be extensive between the current Asheville app and what will be essentially the new Asheville
What
app.
would be non-extensive?
Um,
Give me a ballpark.
I think that there was mention of.
day?
I
6
think-
months?
I think something, a couple weeks was maybe roughly.
Yeah, well, we would have to get
It's gonna
back
take
with
weeks.
you on exactly what that means, because then there's the whole, choosing, getting under contract, and then launching whatever the new platform's gonna be, and I don't wanna overpromise, which is why we've developed this interim solution where people can still, if there's something, there's a hole in a fence, if there is a pothole, Parks and Recreation, Water, Public Works, all, their services are noted through this app, making sure that people have some resource. It's not going to
Yeah.
be the same level of service. It's not, because it's not a new app yet, but we are moving to a new product that we hope will be, as we assume will be just
Will
as
all the
good.
history go away? I'm kind of, I like my hundreds of historical reports and submissions over 10 years. It's all gone, it's just going to disappear.
Well, we can look into that. I'll have to check with IT on that one, just with what the,
I mean, I
what the
was
contract
kind of
says.
thinking of that when I was like, wow, I
So
remember
great.
that. I mean, it's 10 years of history. I've reported hundreds of things. It's gone, huh?
All right. Thanks for that question. It's
It's just sad.
a lot. Okay.
Well, it does sound like it's going to be bumpy, and I kind of feel like, well, if we're not going to put the brakes on it now, if, we don't have another council meeting for 2 weeks, but if there is some type of an opportunity for this to be extended, like, if there's I don't know if there's any litigation pending, I'm looking at you, Brad, something where a court might rule that there needs to be a stay on the implementation or something like that, I would hope that we would take advantage of that to give us time to get all our ducks in a row.
We've been watching closely. There's been committee meetings on this at the federal level with the possibility of an extension being issued. Has not happened yet, or coming down to the wire, so we're continuing to watch, and we'll keep council informed.
I can't believe Congress isn't jumping at an opportunity to help cities. That was sarcasm.
Is it going to
Okay.
require any change in our behavior to be compliant? Like, how we always go, okay, it passes unanimously or whatever. I feel like we've been adding that in. Do we need to change our behavior at all?
There will be situations where we might ask you to make sure you're introducing yourselves when you're speaking during meetings so that that's more clear. But generally speaking, no. Most of the stuff that you're going to see is when you're looking at the staff reports, website material, other digital accessible material. But you should not have to worry too much about adjusting your behaviors, but we'll keep you posted if any of that arises.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, all right. Does that conclude the manager's report? Yes, thank you. Okay, we have one public hearing item. That is a public hearing to consider amending the conditional zoning ordinance for property located at 30 Buchanan Place for the purpose of making amendments to the project conditions. Will Palmquist is fighting his way to the front of the room. He's cute. Maybe you're going to put it in slide show? Oh.
Which one was it?
Yeah.
Well, here we go. Got it. Thanks, Michelle. Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Will Palmquist with Planning and Urban Design. I will be presenting this request for a conditional zoning amendment for the property at McCormick Field. Here you can see that property outlined in the aerial imagery and the existing zoning, which is institutional conditional zone from a prior conditional zoning in 2023, which was updated 6 months ago as well. The existing future land use is parks and open space. No change in that would be required for this request. So that original conditional zoning from 2023 essentially was for the project to receive technical modifications to the zoning requirements to allow for the improvements to McCormick Field that have been mostly completed. An amendment to that 6 months ago was to confer an additional technical amendment for the lighting standards. Before you this evening is one additional modification to the underlying zoning regarding signage. So currently the site is limited to 2 signs total at 120 square feet total in the institutional district. This amendment would allow for 3 signs in total with a total square footage of 292 square feet. One internally illuminated sign at the ticket entry area at 64 square feet, 1 internally illuminated sign above the right field grandstand at 100 square feet, and then 1 mural along the pavilion wall with a maximum square footage of 128 square feet. You can see those 3 signs rendered in this illustration. And just to note that the zoning modification would basically just be for the number of signs and the square footage. It would not regulate the contents of the signage. This was reviewed and approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission at their April 1st meeting. Staff finds it's consistent with the future land use designation of parks and open space, and also supports goals in the comprehensive plan, such as to promote access to well-maintained parks and open space for all, and to enhance and celebrate Asheville's unique places and destinations. Therefore, staff concurs with Planning and Zoning Commission and recommends approval of the proposed conditional zoning amendment, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. No questions? Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm going to open the public hearing and close the public hearing because no one's signed up to speak under this item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the conditional zoning amendment request for the current McCormick Field property located at 30 Buchanan Place, zoned institutional conditional zoning, and find that the request is reasonable in the public interest, is consistent with the city's comprehensive plan, meets the development needs of the community in that the request, 1, dedicates adequate resources to meet the maintenance demands of existing parks, including sufficient capital and operational funding consistent with best management practices and community standards for high level of service. And 2,
continues to create accessible urban places throughout the city and ensure the downtown services, amenities, and resources are designed to serve residents as well as visitors.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. That concludes our public hearings. We have some items of new business. Thank you, Will. An ordinance amending Article 6, regulation of graffiti of Chapter 10, nuisances of the Asheville Code of Ordinances to amend the definition of graffiti. And Carly Gillingham. I'm trying to remember if you're making your debut. No, second. Okay, all right. I've been thinking. All right. Back by popular demand. It is Carly Gillingham.
That's what
So I just do present right here.
you got.
Is that- okay. That's not
There you go.
Thank you. Good evening, council. Carly Gillingham, Assistant City Attorney here at the city. I'm here to talk to you about an amendment to our graffiti ordinance, which is Chapter 10, Article 6, in our nuisance code. I believe Amy Deaton is here for any additional questions. She's the Director of Public Works. So here's some key takeaways. Currently, our Code of Ordinances regulates graffiti as a public nuisance. The current definition of graffiti includes temporary, easily removable chalk and other water-soluble materials unless used in connection with traditional children's activities or any lawful business or public purpose or activity. This amendment would modify the definition of graffiti to first remove chalk from the general definition, but add and define, and the language will be on the following slides, sprayable chalk, which is a type of industrial strength, more permanent chalk that is not as water soluble. It would remove undefined terms like lawful business and public purpose or activity in the above text. It would exclude chalk markings from the definition of graffiti so long as they're placed upon streets or sidewalks and don't pose any public safety risk. And it would keep exceptions for any markings done in any material for utilities or survey work. So background, our graffiti ordinance was first passed in 2014. It allows both criminal and civil enforcement via penalties to perpetrators and property owners who fail to remove graffiti after notice. It has a provision for appeals of enforcement actions. The current definition of graffiti does include chalk, unless, again, used in those certain contexts. The amendment is basically intended to update the ordinance according to evolving First Amendment legal guidance, improve clarity by removing undefined terms, and ensure efficiency of staff resources. That was just a little background that not necessary for this presentation. This did go to Public Safety Committee. So here's kind of a restatement of what this would be in a little bit more detail. I'll show you the proposed amendment language in a moment. The practical results of this amendment would be that chalk markings on streets and sidewalks are no longer considered graffiti unless they pose a public safety risk. We would keep that exception for utility and survey markings. That's the kind of thing where Duke or Enbridge might dig for utility lines and mark where they are. And it may reduce staff time and material costs associated with addressing temporary, easily removable graffiti. So here's the proposed markup. As you can see, it would just remove the word chalk from the list of materials in the definition of graffiti. And then it would add that sprayable chalk, and that's chalk paint, marking chalk, inverted chalk, and similar substances. Again, those are those industrial strength forms of chalk that don't wash off as easily. And it would add that utility and survey crew exception, and it would specify that chalk markings are not graffiti if they are made on streets or sidewalks unless it is determined that they create a public safety risk. Here's just a clean version of that. And I'm happy to take any questions. Otherwise, I can put up that suggested motion language. And this is the first reading. I think Brett can talk a little more about that.
I don't see anyone sign up for public comment. Are you ready for a motion?
Yeah, we'll need unless there's any other questions.
I couldn't remember the graffiti dog's name. What was it?
Augie.
Everybody's saying it, but I can't hear it. What?
Augie.
Augie, thank you.
R.I.P. Augie. This
I
is for
move to
you.
adopt an ordinance amending Article 6 regulation of graffiti of Chapter 10 nuisances in the Asheville Code of Ordinances to amend the definition of graffiti.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Let me just double checking. Doesn't look like it. All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you.
See you soon, Augie.
See, yep. See. Okay, next is an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Asheville to provide for repair, closing, or demolition of abandoned structures. Mark Matheny is going to come and talk to us about this item.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council. Hope everyone's doing well this evening. I'm Mark Matheny, the Director of Development Services, and I am here to speak on proposed additional ordinance wording. Here we go. Our key takeaways are the proposed ordinance update provides additional tool for our compliance team to pursue the building regulatory compliance process. Our compliance team currently regulates the unsafe building ordinance and minimum housing. Compliance of the ordinance includes providing a safe, remediated building for the general public. Demolition is not the only method of compliance. It's good to know that since 2023, the efforts of our compliance team have resulted in the demolition of 8 residential buildings that would, at that time, have qualified as an abandoned building. And the important thing to note here is the demolition occurred by the current owner or new owners of that property that they were working with. This was not city-initiated demolitions. For this presentation, a proactive building demolition program is not included in this ordinance change and would require significant additional human and financial resources.
What, is that what you told us about in the first time you presented to us, and how much was that?
So we didn't dive very deeply into it, right? We just used roughly what our current inventory at the time was about 30 buildings. And human-wise, we assumed 2 administrative positions and well into the over millions of dollars, right? And so based on the inventory that we had at the time, if we were to create a program and aggressively go after these, which is not our intent, right? That's why I want this last bullet point to be very, very well known, is that this is not why we're here tonight, right? If we were to create an aggressive program, it would take a lot of effort, both financially and staff-wise. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay. So the update, the wording from the wording for this intended statute ordinance comes from our general statutes, 160D-1201. And it identifies abandoned structures. The wording comes straight from the general statutes. Any local government may by ordinance provide for the, and it goes on, and then we pick up this piece right here, the ordinance may provide for the repair, closing, or demolition of such structure pursuant to the same provisions and procedures that are prescribed in this article for repair, closing, and demolitions of dwellings found to be unfit for human habitation. This is just the second part of 2 pieces of this statute. Right, and so that's why it's talking about the residential part above it. The exercise of police powers and authority. I don't necessarily I don't know, should I read the whole thing? Okay, as from the previous conversation we just had, I'm kind of thinking all the way through this, what you guys just heard as our accessibility updates. So really, I just want to get into kind of the middle of this paragraph. Abandoned structures which may result in a health and safety hazards due to the attraction of insects or rodents, conditions creating a fire hazard dangerous to conditions constituting a threat to children, or frequent use by vagrants as living quarters in the absence of sanitary facilities. And this is the wording straight out of our North Carolina statutes. When we started presenting this early on in the year, conversations came up about why it's called abandoned buildings and is there better words. And really the logic there is just it's coming right out of the general statute, right? And so abandoned building originates from the North Carolina general statutes, as I said, 160D 1201, which is the basis of the update, and would go on to say in the past year period, a 1 year period, and which is determined by the city to be a health or safety hazard as a result. And this is exactly what I just said, right?
So it's not that it's just been abandoned for a year, it's that it's abandoned and it poses an additional public health hazard.
And that's a critical statement that you just made. And yes, that's what it is. It doesn't mean that it's just an abandoned building can be an abandoned building, right? But once it becomes a nuisance to the community for these specific reasons, is the important part of that. That's right. And the owners generally try to work against that. Our compliance team absolutely works with the owners to ensure that that doesn't happen that way. So, yeah, correct. The purpose of this article is to authorize the remediation and prevention of the health or safety hazards proposed by abandoned structures by empowering the city to take action to repair, close, or demolish such structures for the protection of life, health, welfare, safety, and property of the general public. And then the scope, which is really what's kind of on everybody's mind. The provisions of this article are applicable to all structures existing and hereafter constructed within the city of Asheville that are abandoned structures necessitating repair, closing, and demolition to protect public health, welfare, and safety. And since this is a short presentation, I won't go back through the key takeaways. They're the same as in the beginning, and glad to answer any and all questions.
One of my questions sounds like is also coming from the community is how are we differentiating between long abandoned buildings that are draining public resources and newly destroyed buildings because of Hurricane Helene? Because it seems like folks are applying for the hazard mitigation grant funds, and we don't want to do anything that jeopardizes their ability to receive those funds by knocking down the structure that provides the proof. So do we have some guidance on that?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And it adds certainly the level of complication to an already relatively complicated process for abandoned buildings. And as far as you know, I reference in the key takeaways how we're creating a tool for the toolbox, right? Another tool that we're creating at the same time is really we have the inventory of these buildings, and the inventory keeps growing as people let us know buildings that we haven't got on there yet. We're also developing a priority for that, right? So we're going to create basically a priority filter for when to approach each of these buildings. And within that filter, we don't really have a name for it yet, but we're basically creating a TS lean acknowledgement, right? So if it's a spreadsheet, maybe there's a row or a column, excuse me, that identifies that it's a TS lean. And the idea is that
Tropical Storm Helene, yeah.
Oh, sorry, Tropical Storm Helene, yes.
Right.
Just
the lingo.
I've gotten out from TSH, right? So, yeah, so we would have a Tropical Storm Helene kind of filter on that evaluation. Our thoughts right now is this risk evaluation table will be basically point designated. So as there's higher risk, the points would add up. And then, you know, we might default TS Helene onto like a -X or whatever until we can get through allow the owners basically to get through the entire process for whatever federal or local financial or assistance that they can get.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm struggling because we're not being asked to pay for it, right? So we have this inventory and you put them in an order. How does doing this help with what we currently have if we're not funding the demolition?
Correct. And so as you see on bullet point number 2 here, it talks about how our compliance team is working, that the only activity they have for going through the compliance process is using either unsafe building or minimum housing. And we have buildings that don't really clearly fit within either of those. And it doesn't mean we ignore them, right? We still approach them and we go through the compliance process, which is a long process because we want the owner to protect and have the ability to correct their properties, right? And so what this is doing is giving us a third item where it's unsafe buildings, our abandoned building ordinance, and then our minimum housing ordinance.
So of the current inventory, doing this helps us get at what percentage of our current inventory that we can't get at with the current
Oh, that's a
ordinance?
great question I don't have an answer for. But what it does allow is, if we approach it on the unsafe building aspect of it, first of all, it has to be an unsafe building. This allows us to do it that's not determined through the North Carolina State Building Code to be unsafe. And the other piece is, honestly, we have to kind of stretch the wording in the ordinances once we have the open hearings with the owners about how this fits into the right direction in order for them to get into compliance. And there's just, there's wording that's included in there. And what this abandoned building ordinance gives us the opportunity is to have the right wording in order to work with the owners to get them into compliance.
Can I be more specific, because where I live? How would this change have affected the mountaineering?
So the Mountaineering obviously is a property on Tunnel Road, which the city has recently used what we call abatement action on. We've actually entered that property and done some cleanup work with city staff and our contractors. I think that is a good example of the kind of situations that the city would utilize this additional language. We did not need it specifically for that one because we already had some pre-existing language in our ordinances. Mark's already mentioned this. The best way I can describe this is that in any sort of property nuisance, in order for us to hold the owner of those properties accountable to, quite frankly, fix their own properties, we need an ordinance on the books or a statute saying that you must do these things. Right now, we've identified a specific hole. It may not be a big hole, but it's a hole. We currently have the ability to address residential properties that are posing a hazard, and non-residential properties only if they don't meet the building code.
So the mountaineering would have met it.
And I'll leave it to Mark to say if we had building code issues there. I think that's
Right. And a good question, and the Mountaineer is a great example because it has multiple buildings, and some of them are unsafe buildings, and some of them actually would fit within what we're trying to do here, right? They aren't necessarily unsafe, but they are a nuisance, right? And so because that property is so big and there's so many buildings, this one would actually probably take both. Or having both would allow us to have a better conversation with the owner about coming into compliance.
So, to be super clear, because I've heard some concerns about, what if there's construction, or as one of my colleagues said, they're working with the feds for a payout. So if they're actively working to get something done with that property, then they would not fall under this ordinance. It would be a willful, ignoring of us or something to that effect.
Yeah, so an interesting way to ask that question, and the one thing that we have to understand is we're gonna acknowledge all the buildings, right? We're gonna inventory, and if this is a building under that condition, and it came onto, let's say, the abandoned building or unsafe building, we're still going to acknowledge it, right? We're still going to capture it on our inventory list. But there's a series of communication, of required communications that we have with the property and building owners. And after we get through that series of required ones, we also have a lot of optional ones that we've been doing for years. That's how our compliance teams works, right? So we always stay in communication. And frequently the owners will tell us how long it's going to take. We're like, can you put that board back up in 30 days, right? And they're like, well, I'm still waiting for the feds, and that sort of thing. So as we have those conversations, and part of the risk assessment that we've identified is that we don't necessarily have on the written policy or a process right now. What we're going to do is have like a refresher, right? So maybe every 90 days we check in on what that property looks like. And call in on the owner and see what kind of updates they've had from federal or local or any other resources that may be available. Yeah, so we would keep a constant monitoring on that.
Okay. So it sounds like the difference between what we have on the books now and what we would have is now, if a building is out of compliance because of building code, then we can hold that property owner responsible. However, but if it fits property code, but is a public health nuisance right now, there's no mechanism to get them to repair or remediate that up until demolition.
Right now it's a stretch. We do it, right? And that's how we have the properties that we've been working on for the last, X amount of years, many years. We all know there's a lot of buildings that have been out there. And we have to work within kind of our ability within the unsafe building wording in order to even get those hearings and those orders that are required from the ordinances and the general statutes.
So this language change gives us more decisive and clear language to hold community, like property owners, accountable to following through with addressing their unsafe building.
That's a great way to summarize it.
Awesome. I think that's really important. I think especially after Helene, and I appreciate you, Councilman Roney, bringing that up. I think there is a difference between the house in my neighborhood that had a house fire, and the family's been really trying to figure out how to move forward, and folks that have flood damage and storm damage to places that have been a real challenge in neighborhoods for a long time. And we haven't had clear authority to really step in and say, this is unsafe. The neighbors are very concerned. Children are walking by this, whatever. So I think that having more clear language to have expanded authority to hold people accountable is in the best interest of the public.
I'm thankful this item is here. I appreciate all the extensive detail sharing and clarifications around Helene. I'm reminded why we are even talking about this, like the Mountaineer was a good example, but are we also looking at in the future expanding it to residential or leaving that one alone? Because I ask because, there's some concern up here, are we reaching too far? Is the language adequate? But it was really clear in our inboxes from the public and just in our own passing by, some locations are just so far gone. I don't want us to get too into the weeds of trying to protect from things that really we're not ever gonna do, right? There's a clear need for some of these abandoned buildings, but I'm curious if we will move into some residential at all. I know we've had some, like there's some houses on State Street that have come up repeatedly in our emails.
Yeah, so they, so we already really have a process for residential, right? Our minimum housing actually gives us a very similar direction for compliance.
So that doesn't need any bolstering, because I feel like we've had some of that in the past.
We have.
But it did
That's
take
right.
a long
We just
time.
need bolstering.
We need bolstering. I'm bolstering for it.
I mean, we have the tool. We're not only are we very slow to use it, we even then, once we're to the point where we can demo the property, or it takes a long time.
Councilmember Turner, if I can add to that, it's really interesting you bring it up because the state statute that allows us to adopt this particular ordinance says that you already have the authority to do the exact same thing for residential property.
Okay.
You just simply don't have to adopt an ordinance. It just requires this additional step for non-residential properties.
Okay. That's helpful.
Okay, so any other questions? Do I have a motion? And then we have a couple of people signed up under public comment.
Yes. I move to adopt an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the Code of Ordinances to insert a new Article 8, abandoned structures, to provide for the repair, closing, or demolition of abandoned structures deemed health or safety hazards.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. We have 2 people signed up to speak under this item. You'll have 3 minutes. Please watch the lights on the lectern. Green means go, orange means you're getting ready to stop, and red means stop. The first is Drew West.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, and city staff. My name is Drew West, and I represent the Council of Independent Business Owners. I'm here expressing our members' opposition to the proposed ordinance amending Chapter 4 to expand the city's authority over abandoned structures. While we appreciate the intent of the address to address properties that pose legitimate health and safety risks, however, as drafted, this ordinance raises serious concerns for the business community and property owners across Asheville. First, the definition of abandoned structures is overly broad. A property deemed vacant or not in active use for 1 year, regardless of the reason, could be swept into this process. Many commercial properties experience extended vacancies due to market conditions, financing challenges, or redevelopment timelines. This ordinance risks penalizing owners who are actively working towards reinvestment. Second, the ordinance grants significant discretionary authority to staff with limited guardrails. The ability to initiate action based on complaints combined with administrative hearings where formal rules of evidence do not apply, creates an uncertainty and exposes property owners to inconsistent outcomes. Third, the financial implications are substantial. The provision allowing the city to place liens not only on the subject property, but also on properties owned within the city and even within 1 mile raises serious concerns. This could have a chilling effect on local investment and redevelopment, particularly for small business owners who hold multiple properties within the city. Additionally, the potential for demolition after a relatively short period, coupled with the city's ability to declare abandonment of intent to repair, creates a risk for properties that may be a part of a longer-term redevelopment plan. This is especially concerning in a challenging economic environment we face post-Helene. Finally, while the ordinance references concerns about vagrancy and unsafe conditions, it does not address the root causes contributing to these issues. Business owners are already facing increasing challenges related to public safety and enforcement. Expanding regulatory authority over private property without addressing those underlying issues is unlikely to produce desired outcomes. SEBO urges the council to pause and revisit this ordinance with input from the business community. We believe a more balanced approach is needed, one that targets truly dangerous properties while protecting property rights, encouraging investment, and ensuring clear, consistent standards. We stand ready to work with you to develop solutions that improve safety without creating unintended consequences for Asheville's business climate. Thank you.
Thank you. The second person signed up to speak under this is Matt Allen.
Good evening. I'll try not to echo too much of what Drew said. My name is Matt Allen. I work for the local Realtor Association in Governmental Affairs. And, first just want to acknowledge, I think we can all agree addressing unsafe buildings is good policy as a general matter. Also, just want to acknowledge, based on the presentation, you're authorized to pass something related to this under state law. All that said, I do think that we should pump the brakes because there are some provisions that are unclear and can lead to unintended consequences. I submitted a written comment earlier today, a little more comprehensive and thorough, but I just want to touch on those points that I sent. The first thing is related to, and Mr. Matheny addressed this briefly, but regarding this regulatory gap, it would be interesting to know before we move forward, to know just how much of a gap exists and what this ordinance would address as opposed to the existing unsafe building ordinance. If you're looking at the definition in the abandoned structures ordinance, I'm just looking at health and safety hazard as a result of insects, rodents, fire hazard, dangerous conditions, et cetera, et cetera. It seems to me that could all come under the purview of the unsafe buildings ordinance. And, again, I heard earlier from Mr. Branham and from Mr. Matheny that that's not necessarily always the case, but I think it'd be interesting to know how many of those parcels wouldn't come under the unsafe buildings ordinance. Second, Drew alluded to this, Councilwoman Roney mentioned this too. It would still be helpful to have something in writing in the ordinance distinguishing between Helene impacted properties and then properties that have just been vacant for a year and have health and safety issues. Just kind of saying that, yeah, after it gets passed, we'll address that and make sure to distinguish between the properties doesn't provide as much reassurance as actually having something in the actual ordinance distinguishing between those types of properties. Third thing I wanted to mention is that the ordinance lacks standards for establishing timeframes for property owners to repair or demolish an abandoned structure. So, looking at section 4-229, it talks about the public officer serving the order and then within the time specified. So, the lack of standards or other guidance for the public officer to apply in determining how much time an owner should be given is concerning. Just as a practical matter, how long it takes to repair or demolish a building will depend on all sorts of factors, the size of the building, the nature and extent of the repairs necessary. So including some reasonable guardrails for setting compliance deadlines and then providing standards for the public officer would be helpful.
Thank you.
In closing, please consider continuing this for more discussion. Thank you so much.
No clapping, please, I'm sorry. But if you really like it, just give us a hands in the air, hands up. Okay, council, we have a motion and a second for this item. This just seems somewhat performative really at this stage, as you would say, because we're not funding it. But it is a statute that authorizes cities to take these actions if needed. And a lot of cities have adopted these ordinances because there are times where we encounter situations where the ordinance is a much more efficient vehicle. Frankly, in the history of the city of Asheville, as I've known it, it is extremely rare for the city to take action in actually demolishing a building. There are many times where, and unbeknownst to many people in the public, where a property becomes derelict and the city is trying to notify the property owners about the condition of the property and asking them to remediate it. That is 99.9% of the case most of the time. In fact, often when we receive a complaint from neighbors about a property and we bring the staff into the conversation, they'll tell us, oh yeah, we've already been working with the owner, we've contacted them, and we're taking these steps to secure the property. So usually that's the case. And there's a variety of reasons why the city doesn't take that further step to actually demolish the property. One, it's a judicial process, so it's onerous and it's expensive, and you can put a lien on the property, but you might not recover the funds. I think we're lucky in that our city doesn't have a lot of vacant or derelict buildings as people. You go to other cities, you see a lot more. So we don't see as much of it here, but we do have certain situations that crop up where the vacant building is posing a danger to the adjacent community. And the other issue in terms of balancing, I know we heard from the Realtors Association here tonight asking us to pump the brakes on this. We actually do hear from a lot of property owners who are concerned about preserving the values of their property and the safety of their property because maybe the neighboring property has fallen in disrepair. We probably have collectively received 100 emails about the car wash on Sweeten Creek Road that has been damaged. That is a Helene damaged property. So, the city has not moved to do anything other than contact the owner and try to work with the owner to secure the property and clean up the property. We certainly don't want to harm anyone's ability to fully realize the hazard mitigation opportunities you can receive if your property flooded during the hurricane. So I guess I think we've always been so cautious with the use of these ordinances. Historically, I don't see any reason why that approach would be changing. As was stated, we're not funding the two positions that would be needed to have a really robust program, which we've never had. But there obviously are some extreme situations like the Mountaineer Inn where the city has to go to court to deal with a property that's just creating a safety issue. So, with that, I think that it's appropriate for the city to add this to their toolbox in the event that it's needed. It may be something we don't use for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years or 4 years. It could be a long time before it's ever put into action. But I appreciate Councilman Hess working on this issue and hearing the call from the community around one particular situation and asking, what else can we do? And our city attorney said, well, actually, there is something else you could add. So that's how we got here. That's how that journey landed us in this place. Anybody else?
No, I want to address something that was said in one of the public comments about, I think the statement was that we could have non-abandoned buildings swept up in this process. And I don't think that's accurate. I think they will have plenty of opportunity to assure the staff that they're working on something, clean up something that is minute that will allow it to be not in further trouble. I don't think things are just going to get randomly swept up. We will have some measure of control and discernment over this. As the mayor said, should we ever need to use it? Perhaps we won't.
So I'll go ahead and say, I'm going to be maybe the lone no, based on just a philosophy that I have. I fear that it is performative, and upon passage, the community will have expectations which this vote will not meet. We are not, as the mayor said, funding the actual positions, and it may not happen for years. Earlier in this process, I'd asked that this be considered throughout the budgeting process so that maybe we could fill those positions, and as of today, it hasn't come before us in a budget discussion. So that's the reason for my no vote.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other comments, questions? All right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you.
So how would that fit into ADA compliance? Would we then announce that it passed by a certain number?
Oh, good point, and I should announce.
The raising of the hands.
That will be, the final vote, as it always has been, will be reflected in the minutes. The minutes will be written in an accessible format. On the video, obviously, we're going to be adding closed captions to things like that, and we may ask you to do a verbal vote. It's a great question. It's little details like that we're discovering as we're running these sort of scenarios in our head. But that's a classic situation where we may ask you to audibly vote as a roll call vote.
Thank you.
Or audibly vote as a roll call vote, or just say, I think just say the vote, I think what you were asking, Kim, was that I state that the vote was a 6-1 vote.
I think that would also.
So, yeah, okay. Yes, good, yeah. All right, and the final item of new business is a resolution updating the lease agreement with DeWine Seeds Silver Dollar Baseball LLC for McCormick Field. Chris Coral is magically here to talk to us about this.
Magically. Good evening. Thanks for having me. Chris Coral, Director of Community and Regional Entertainment Facilities for the city, here to talk about naming rights for McCormick Field. So, key takeaways for today: Lewis McCormick Field is owned by the city. It was originally named after our then staff bacteriologist, Dr. Lewis McCormick, and has been leased to the Asheville tourists, the current ownership since 2010. We just completed, well, in the next 6 days, we will complete a $38.5 million renovation for opening day, which will be 1 week from today, and that will help us get into compliance with Major League Baseball's Professional Development League facility standards. This group approved a 20-year lease of the facility in May of 2025, Prior to that, the deal points that were associated were approved in 2023. And the annual lease payments from the team will help offset the annual debt service payments that we have to take out the bond debt for the project. Within the lease, there's a provision that grants the right and the authority to market and sell the naming rights of the facility to the team, and it gives them the chance to do what they can with it, and we did that to help raise our total lease payment. And the team has now secured a naming rights sponsor and proposes to rename the facility to Home Trust Bank, or Home Trust Park, after the sponsor, Home Trust Bank, excuse me. So brief history, 2016, the team in the city commissioned a facilities study. We found that we needed about $6 million in recommended improvements. We did about 80,000 of those. It turns out to be a very good thing because we would have invested in the facility and then had to do additional work later, which we'll get to in a second here. In 2019, Major League Baseball announced a planned contraction of minor league baseball, which is the player development league. In 2020, that actually happened. So we had 42 teams lose their affiliation. Our team actually lost ours briefly. We were dropped by the Colorado Rockies and picked up by the Houston Astros at that point. And in 2020, Major League Baseball issued new licenses to all the remaining teams that are valid through 2030. And they set out a new standard of facility standards and a rubric scoring system to apply beginning in 2023. McCormick Field scored in the bottom 10% nationally. That's where it's good that we didn't do those improvements in 2016 because there's some things that we would have had to redo that were not considered important back in 2016 that then were of the new standards. So in 2023, council approved a funding letter of commitment to Major League Baseball for facility upgrades, and then we worked out an agreement with the city, the county, Tourism Development Authority, and the team on a joint funding plan to restore the facility and meet Major League Baseball's facility standards. We started construction the day after the season ended in 2023. Opening day, like I mentioned, is 7 days away, and we are this close to done at the moment, and we will get done. Key deal points with that agreement, each entity involved had some really specific conditions that they wanted to make sure were met in order to bring their funding to the table. So we all knew that we needed to meet facility standards. We wanted to guarantee that the team would stay in Asheville through the duration of the debt service payments, a requirement to expand events outside of professional baseball, which we've already begun. We have college baseball that's already been announced in May. We'll be announcing some volleyball events later this week. We have some leads going on some concerts, and the team has hired a special event position that is a full-time position dedicated to non-baseball events. She started just a couple weeks ago, so that process is rolling to get into non-baseball events there. We wanted to retain affordability in ticket pricing. You can still get through the gates for $12, which is a great deal for a baseball game. Expand sustainability practices at the concession stand. Maximize private sector funding. That was the team lease and potential naming rights when we were talking about this in 2023. And managing traffic for baseball and non-baseball events, which the team has agreed to do for all events at McCormick Field over a certain threshold. That was part of the first conditional zoning that we came to for the property. And amending the fireworks night structure. So naming rights. The lease provides the right and authority to market and sell the naming rights for the stadium and to retain the revenue therefrom to the team. But the team is also responsible for any costs and expenses associated. If the naming rights license expires and the field needs to go back to McCormick Field, it is the team's expense to get signage back to McCormick and take care of that flip back to what it currently is. The identity of any future sponsor at the time we were writing the lease of the name of the stadium shall be subject to city council approval, which cannot be unreasonably withheld, conditioned, or delayed. And the name shall be appropriate for a publicly funded or publicly owned facility and shall not be in bad taste, offensive to the city's image, a potential source of embarrassment to the city, or in conflict with the city's community standards. So those lines are straight out of the lease, so you can understand how it's written. And when we were negotiating the final lease payment and the funding structure, potential naming right funds were factored into the annual payments from the team when we were working on how much they were going to be paying us. Their lease over the 20 years averages a little bit over $475,000 per year guaranteed revenue to the city. So Home Trust Bank, here's just two versions of the logo, the horizontal and vertical logo. Home Trust Bank is here, supported in Asheville, headquartered in Asheville. It's 2 years younger than the stadium, so at 100 years itself. The conditional zoning you approved earlier, this sign here that you can see is actually above the ticket entry. Hopefully will be in place for opening day, but that was one of the signs that was included. Home Trust Bank's a frequent award winner as Best Places to Work, Best Banks Awards, and their company fundamentals really align with City Council visions. They have literacy initiatives, they actively try to fund affordable housing projects, and they do financial education and many more. A highlight I mentioned to some folks earlier today, they're committing some funds to local charities for every strikeout throughout the season. So it's just like every little bit, right? So cheer on the pitchers. And back to key takeaways, and this was a pretty short one like Mark's, so I won't go through them again, but open to any questions that you
Well,
may have.
since I asked for the lease agreement and read it like a true nerd, I wanted to point out that for those who are following along the conversation, I still hear concerns about why support taking care of this facility. And number one, it's our city park. So when I toured it back in 2023 and it was falling apart, it was clear to me that allowing a public facility to fall apart and rot in East End Valley Street wasn't appropriate. But while we were getting a better deal for Asheville, I came up with a huge list and I reviewed it against the contract. And I wanted to highlight, as you already did, Section 901 talks about the use of the park. So before this new contract, it was just a park that we allowed to be used for baseball. Now it's our park that is used for baseball and other park uses. And in fact, there's a requirement in here to have 35,000 attendees for non-baseball events. So what would it look like to have trivia night, movie night, ice skating in the winter time like the Greenville facility does? I think there's a lot of ways for the public to benefit from our park beyond baseball and in addition to baseball. I just wanted to confirm, which is in the documents, but maybe you can speak a little bit to some of the neighborhood concerns around parking and how we're going to address that when we do things like host concerts.
Yeah. First, to get back to your 35,000 person requirement, as a note, if the team does not meet that, there's actually a monetary penalty, so their lease payment goes up for each person under that. So they are incentivized just like we are to host non-baseball events, so it's a double edge there. Parking plan, we initiated it, it may have been last season, it could have been 2 seasons ago at this point, but the tourists are hosting or managing parking for every tourist baseball game, and they're expanding that to non-baseball events. So anytime we have, I think it's over 500 people simultaneously in the building, they will manage the parking aspects. So when, I should say when, not if, we get to concerts there'll be a full parking management plan, letting the neighbors both sides of the stadium, Oakhurst and East End Valley Street, know what the timing is of the event, what's happening, where it's going. And if we go way back to 2015, I think it was, the last concert that was put on at the stadium, the tourists work with area lots, I think in a mile radius, to have parking available so that people could park all around and not in the neighborhood and then come to the event. That was for a Florida Georgia Line and Nelly show. Tourists currently run a shuttle from the garage that's on Ashland Avenue in Cox, the new 500 space. We would do that, and we'd also be running it from other shuttles based on potential capacity for the concert. Hopefully they're big concerts, so we'll be running shuttles from everywhere, but if they're smaller, it'll scale based on the total attendees expected.
And the other thing I was just going to mention, I was worried about the naming rights when we were headed in this direction, and I am glad that it's a local owned business.
To piggyback on that, well, first, I'm glad you mentioned the positive aspects for Home Trust. I worked at a nonprofit that did affordable housing, and every year Home Trust was a consistent funder. Were there any other corporations in contention? Can you tell us who they were?
I don't know.
Okay.
This was handed specifically to the team, and we have been kept out of that specifically.
Because I heard something, but I won't say. And then, secondly, was there, because this is the sentimental side of me and some things that I've seen online, was there consideration to like Home Trust Park at McCormick Field. Like a merger.
I can't
So
specifically
that the
speak to that.
10-year-old in me can still be like nostalgic.
The team worked that agreement out with Home Trust for the name. I would liken this to the Civic Center, so many people still call us the Civic Center. I appreciate when you all call us the Harris Cherokee Center Asheville, because that helps with our naming rights in the future. And that will really help the team in the future too, if and when a renegotiation ever comes, to continue calling it Home Trust Bank, or Home Trust Park and not McCormick Field. But it is still McCormick Field, so it's, you know, Home Trust, or it's McCormick Field, DBA, Home Trust Bank in theory, right? It's a license for the name, but it is still McCormick Field at heart. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right, we already have, oh, we don't. We need a motion and a second. Anybody ready for that?
I got a motion. I make a motion to adopt a resolution authorizing the renaming of Lewis McCormick Field located at 30 Buchanan Place in the city of Asheville, North Carolina, 28801 to Home Trust Park.
Second.
And I'm sad that Jonathan Wainscott isn't signed up to tell us about Lewis McCormick, but we do have one person signed up to speak, and that is Dennis Justice.
The bacteriologist?
Maybe Dennis will have a history lesson for us.
Yay.
Is that a tourist t-shirt? No.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of council. I'm Dennis Justice. I have been a volunteer for local sporting events for over 20 years. Dan Wilhelm, the Asheville Smoke, was a friend of mine. Henry Logan absolutely was a friend of mine. He encouraged me to go back to get my bachelor's and master's degrees in sports management. I don't care if I'm the only person that's willing to speak on this. I want to apologize to Dr. Lewis McCormick for not being aware that you were looking to do this when you were considering the bond package, because I would have spoke about it then. No supposed good deed of a bank can compare to the countless lives that Dr. McCormick saved. That name is sacred. Mr. DeWine talks about the sacred nature of the field. It is not sacred if you change that name. And I resent driving here and seeing a billboard on the way over here, them changing the name already when you have not yet officially supported it. They should be rebuked for this. I reject the idea they already put signage at the stadium that says Home Trust Park. I understand they have to put the signage there, but they should have had it covered up until you actually vote in the next few minutes to give them what they want. They should be rebuked for this. You know, what would happen if the University of North Carolina said that we are going to change the court name and take Roy Williams' name off that court and put in Home Trust Bank? There would be riots in Chapel Hill, and I'd be right there with them. If Home Trust Bank wanted to be a part of the community, they should have been involved with the construction of the stadium from day one. Then they would have been justified to have their name on it, like Wrigley Field, okay, or Busch Stadium. They would have been better off helping the soccer community finally build a real soccer stadium, not just finance a bond where they make money, but actually help network with people to help build that stadium. You know, good deeds are filthy rags. There is a tourism fund the state has that's going to give a golf tournament here over $3 million. Why did the DeWine family not pursue that? Is it partially because it was funded by sports betting revenue and Governor DeWine in Ohio opposes sports betting? Is that part of it? That $3 million would have been better for this stadium. But my message is not really for you at this time. I'll be speaking later about pickleball, and I hope you hear it because I think it's a good idea, but there's some technical things I want to talk about. They would have been better off looking to put that money from that fund, for this baseball stadium. Dr. McCormick saved countless lives. There were people in this area that would not have been born had he not done his work. And I think that name is too sacred to change. But my message is not really for you, it's for the arts community. This is the second time we changed a sports venue name in the last few years. I drive by as an Uber driver, the people, passengers from the Asheville airport, and every time we pass the Civic Center, I have to tell them, no, that's not the Harris of Cherokee Casino. It's a naming rights thing. I still drive people to the Civic Center that thinks I was taking them to the casino and they were wrong, okay? The arts community needs to come up with a permanent name for their proposed performing arts center now. And they need to get a state legislature to pass a law saying this building shall be forever known as. Because if you don't, someday down the road, if you get your arts center, a future city council will sell out the arts community for the corporate buck. Thank you, Nessa.
Thank you.
It's your only
All
comment.
right, Yep.
I
yep.
love the passion.
Okay. Remember, just
So on
I have a
828 News
question.
Now, it reads, quote, "By 1905, McCormick was living in Asheville and serving as the city's first bacteriologist. At the time, the city faced a major public health challenge, the common housefly. Swarming the city after decades of livestock traffic, flies were seen as more than a nuisance. They were the carriers of disease, and one man stepped in with a solution that would leave a lasting mark on the city. Dr. Lewis M. McCormick, Asheville's only bacteriologist at the time, believes houseflies were a major cause of disease. In 1905, he launched a grassroots campaign he called Swat That Fly." End quote.
Catch that fly, swat that fly. I'm curious because I see the tourist team is back there. Is there any other memorial to McCormick, Dr. McCormick, on the campus of the stadium? Is there anything? Or this will just disappear with the name? Is there an homage, a plaque?
There is a new will be to be unveiled on Tuesday, a history wall that has, it's on there?
The cornfield letters that were on the front gate are now.
This is an accessibility issue.
Oh, it's
I was just thinking,
accessibility issue.
The old
So
front gate,
the old
McCormick
gate,
letters are there, and a little story about the history. So there's a whole, from the start of time of the stadium to present, history wall now in left field along the concourse.
Okay, so there's a bit of a timeline and a historic walk and a
Yes, there's a
information.
history walk. The McCormick letters that were up starting in 1992 have been moved. They were moved, had to be removed regardless, have been moved to the history walk. And so everything in the history walk talks about McCormick Field history.
Do you have any little flies?
I mean, we can
Statue.
definitely get some free fly
Just
swatter.
Okay, thank
The
you.
McCormick flies.
That's Brian DeWine.
Yes.
Brian DeWine.
I just want to encourage us to continue that name through future planning. The McCormick hot dog, whatever it is. Let's not lose it. Let's not lose it with the naming of the stadium is my point.
Okay. Okay, all right. So, everyone, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion passes 7-0. All right, now we're going to move on to general public comment. I have a lot of people signed up for general public comment who I suspect are maybe not here. So can I just real quick do a little roll call? Okay, so, and just, if you still want to speak, just raise your hand when I call your name.
That can be your visual.
Vince Priester.
Yep.
So still, I see Nina Tovish, Jen Key.
No, Jen.
Okay, Curry First is still here. William Emerson.
Right here.
Okay, Vaughn. And Vaughn, do you still have the three people waving their time for you? Enzo, thank you. Sarah Kent. Okay, Enzo, was it somebody else? Back there, yep. Okay, Enzo and Gorlami. And Jimmy John, okay. Samuel Fleming. Okay, Jen Hampton, you're still here? Yes. Aaron Dahlstrom. You looking? Not here. Paul, Mr. Howell, are you still here? He's gone, okay. Okay, Shahela, Adrian, and Jason. Okay, Sean Snyder. Is that person still here? Debbie Jens.
Gone.
Jordan Garman.
Gone.
Alan Excavitz.
Gone.
Austin Caseman or Cosman?
Gone.
Ann Craig.
Gone.
Lauren Bayer.
Gone.
Camilo Garcia.
Gone.
Okay, hold on, I gotta get that. Patrick Conant.
Here.
Yes, still
Here.
Yep, okay. Finnegan Hinson.
Gone.
Stephen Riblett.
Gone.
Brian Sykes.
Gone.
Ben Jeffries.
Gone.
Drew Gaddis.
Gone.
Loya LaFay.
Lola, gone.
It says Loya, but okay. Natara Kittles.
Gone.
Lavender Lewin.
Gone.
Ben Spencer.
Gone.
Kenyon DeLuca.
Here.
Nina, you're on here twice. Okay, Scott Severson.
Gone.
Sorrel June.
Gone.
Marin Beam.
Gone.
Benjamin, I'm not saying it right. Moskin.
Gone.
Gus Larson.
Gone.
Ethan Steele.
Here.
Dennis Justice, I think.
Here.
Yep, coming back for. Mo Knight.
Gone.
Jessica McLean.
Gone. Oh, no, Jessica's here, sorry. Sorry.
Soren Peterson.
Here.
Here.
And Nicole Lopez.
Here.
Here.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Okay, so with that, we'll be able to do the 3 minutes for each person. And the first person signed up to speak here is Vince Priester.
Oh, my God.
He's about to be a clown.
Is he related to Tanner?
I don't know.
Come to the microphone so everyone at home can hear you too.
I hope y'all guys doing pretty good. Speak like that. Kim, I really want to tell you that it's no offense to the mayor here, but I think you're going to win this year coming up. The reason why I say that because I feel it. You know, I don't like being nervous, so you know what I'm saying, just to talk about it. But it's so much stuff that I want to say, but I really can't get it out because last time I've been here was like 6 years ago, right? So when I was talking to the mayor, I basically told the mayor like several times, right? You got to do better in Asheville. You know, you can't. Oh my God, man. There's so much stuff I want to talk about because I know I got 3 minutes, but you just can't sit back and just talk about all this stuff that's going on in Asheville. There's nothing getting done about it. So I just want to tell you that when you do become mayor, I want you to change everything about Asheville. It's nothing to do here. You know, like, man, I'm so dang nervous. Anyways, I'm trying to tell you that I want you to do better, right? When you do win, don't take this opportunity and say, oh my God, I won the lottery. You know, now I can go get gas. But, you know, I've been at work like all day, like since 5 o'clock this morning. I don't have nothing to do with, I don't have nothing against the mayor. But at the same time, it's nothing being done in Asheville. You look at Asheville look like trash. You know, like I'm sitting here thinking like, damn, I've been working since almost 13 hours. So at the same time, like, I appreciate you, Mayor, I really do. But at the same time, it's like Kobe Bryant. You like Shaquille O'Neal, she like Kobe Bryant. You know, you done had so many opportunities to show Asheville what you supposed to do. But at the end of the time, like I tell you this here, you know what I'm saying, you got a big opportunity. Once you get this big opportunity, don't blow it. You know, for one, you know, just change everything about how Asheville built. It started with the city buses. The city buses look like crap. You got to change the color. And to be honest with you, when you do become mayor, I want to let you know this here because I'm not going to be back here. The reason why I came here today because I was want to be spoken. This, you know, last time I been here 6 years ago. Last time I told the mayor, I said, you got to be open with the public. That's the reason why so many kids is getting in trouble, not minding their parents. They're not doing nothing because there's nothing here in Asheville to do. You know, y'all guys, they worrying about the stadium. That's trash. If you ask me, 41 years, I moved here when I was 38. So moving from California to here is a big difference, you know.
Thank
you. So I just want you to understand, like, I want to congratulate you and tell you that you're going to do a good job.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good one.
Thank you. Nina Tovish.
We've all been there.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council, and City staff. I don't even know where to start with this accessibility, digital accessibility issue. I gather this has been on the books for 2 years. I'm sort of surprised that the public, anyway, is only hearing about it a week before the deadline. I hope, and I think I'm hearing some of that from this council already, I hope that you will not let fear of litigation cripple the city's obligation to make its information, past actions, and decisions accessible as much as possible until you have the time to do the kind of full remediation that I understand that this rule requires. 16% of the population has a form of disability that may affect their ability to use digital assets as well as others. But that means that 84% of the population should not lose access to what there currently is. And it seems to me unlikely, again, not a lawyer, major disclaimer here, not a lawyer, but it seems unlikely to me that a court would ignore good faith attempts to remediate and at the same time demand that information that's already available and accessible be made unavailable and inaccessible to 84% of the population. We live in strange times, but it's hard for me to imagine that. It would be important, I think, to see how the county is responding to this concern and to coordinate with them. I also would beg you not to discontinue the water dashboard and the Asheville app, because with my background in software development, I can tell you that there's no way that with an RFP you get to a transition in weeks for a major project like something like the Asheville app, with even more requirements for assistive functions in it. Not going to happen. I can just, AI is good, but it is not that good. It takes teams months and often years to do this sort of work. So I'm just confident there is no off-the-shelf product that can make for a transition in weeks for something of that ilk. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Curry first.
I'm going to begin by apologizing for my rudeness about 90 minutes ago. I had come here to speak about the surveillance issue, and I had one goal. I wasn't going to say for or against. I was going to say we need to delay this. The community's starting to get interested. They don't have a lot of information, or even perhaps this is council. So I applaud that, and I think it's great that you're moving quickly. April 28 meeting. We don't just leave here and say we're going to look at it. And there's already been a plan. And I appreciate the mayor said this is very important. So we got a good first step. Now, I think communication is a big issue. And I think the most vulnerable community with new surveillance is, of course, the immigrant community. And we know without this issue even coming to the city, the immigrant community in this city justifiably is terrified. And it's 3 letters, ICE. And this is just another surveillance. Maybe this will help them. Maybe this is good. Maybe it's worse. A lot of these surveillance things target the immigrant community. So we have to know, the council, the city, and the immigrant community, is this good or bad? And how do we do that? Communication. And I think we should go to like All Souls. Every Tuesday from 2:30 to 4:30, they have free meals for the immigrant community. They also have food people can take home. That's a venue we could go to. Some members of the city council, some other people, and talk about this. And those people today that support this, they might go there and convince people in the immigrant community says, we want this, we're going to be safer.
I don't think that's likely, but we don't know until we do it. We have to, and we have to go out to them. We can't just say, come to City Hall. They're not gonna come here, but we go to them. Black community. I hear this about, oh, the black community's gonna like it. They're gonna be safer. If they are safer, great. How do we know that? Has a black community said they'll be safer? We need to ask them. We need to talk to them. And maybe when we talk to them, the black community will convince us there's a lot of problems here. So it's got to be community. We go to YMI. They're not going to come here. They'll go to YMI. And we have people there, and we talk about this, the pros and cons. And we educate ourselves as well as the community. This needs to be done. And then the police. I've lived here 15 years. I've done some things with the prior woman police officer, I can't think of her name, where we had citizens and we worked on a new use of force policy. We met with her, she brought in a nonprofit, and they came in and we changed it. Community working with a nonprofit from Baltimore, and we did it. So now the police. This police department, I'm one person I believe is good, but I'm thinking about not the officers, but the people who aren't officers. Somebody who's, thank you.
Thank you. William Emerson.
Hi, thanks for listening to me, Council. I came to speak on the surveillance thing also. This room, all these rooms, city councils all over the country, this is where teeth get sharpened for authority. The N in Nazi stands for nationalist, the Z stands for socialist. That's the extreme right and the extreme left that we argue about in our politics all the time. The police state is an extension of the slavery system in America. We were founded on a penal colony. We were always a penal colony. We fought for our freedoms. Everybody in this country has fought for freedoms to be free from authority. When you stand in this room and you vote on rules, you choose to sharpen the teeth of authority or to dull them. And I've heard a lot in this room tonight. I've heard a lot of trying to stop it and to dull it. And I've heard a lot of people amplifying the teeth. There was a housing situation earlier. That's a situation where somebody was in here trying to sharpen the teeth of authority and give it some more words to make it a little more bite. I hope that before you guys decide on extending the surveillance system, you take into account that America was founded on a penal colony and that we are all still incarcerated in this system. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the next speaker is Vaughn, and I'm not saying the last name because there's not one. So, we have 3 people that waived their time, and I think those 3 people, will you just raise your hand one more time? Thank you so much. So the 3 people have waived their time to you, Vaughn, so you may speak for 10 minutes, and hold on, we're in training over here with the timer.
I do. I would like to start.
And you have a presentation.
I would like to start with a presentation.
Okay.
All right, no on item D, or whatever it's going to be called now.
Hold on, it just takes a second to get.
I think we're on the.
Has my time started already?
No. Okay, there.
Okay.
Well, maybe, does it need to go forward one?
There we go.
There we go, okay.
All right, no on item D, or whatever it will be called in the future. No to mass surveillance in Asheville. Fact, Flock's system was hacked this year, and they pretended it never happened. It should be playing, it's not. Nope. Nope. This should autoplay. Pardon me, I don't know what's happening. Sorry, how do I get this out of the full screen? It's not playing it correctly.
I think it's gonna want you to mute the ad and skip it.
It's supposed to autoplay within the slideshow. Hang on. I'm sorry, can we pause my timer?
Don't worry, we're pausing our time here.
Okay. I may have to just play these through the YouTube app. Here we go.
I think it's playing somewhere.
Are you getting this?
We're seeing your, yeah.
Are you getting the audio?
We are.
None of the data or video footage was encrypted. There was no username or password required. These were all completely public facing for the world to see, and some of them still are. You don't have to be an expert to find and gain access to this. You don't even have to type anything in to see every single person, vehicle, and activity that took place in these locations in the last 31 days. Whether you wanted to watch this footage live in real time or look at footage from a month ago, you could just point and click your way to it like you were watching Netflix. You can even open up the live streams in VLC or cast it to a television. Making any modification to the cameras is illegal, so I didn't do this, but I had the ability to delete any of the video footage or evidence by simply pressing the button. I can see the paths where all the evidence files were located on the file system, and I can see their hashes and signatures. Some of the devices we saw were the familiar-looking Falcon cameras that you see all over the country, but the majority of these were Flock's new Condor cameras, which are designed to detect and track people. They're PTZ cameras, meaning pan, tilt, zoom. And they quite literally use AI to zoom in and follow you around, whether you're a person of interest or not. In just the time that it took to count and verify these vulnerabilities, I saw a family in North Carolina load their infant and a bunch of merchandise in a Lowe's parking lot. And I suppose one could cross-reference their license plate with the Department data breach and find out exactly what garages that will store these new fancy tools. I watched a man leave his house in the morning in New York. I watched a woman jogging alone on the forest trail in Georgia. This trail had multiple cameras. I could watch everyone's looking at their phone. Take a break to watch all of them. How? Because the camera's AI automatically zoomed in. Just like it zoomed in on a couple arguing at a street market in Atlanta. So what? They're still anonymous, right? No, they're not. Within 2 minutes of open source intelligence using a commercial facial recognition engine, I found out that one of them just finished medical school and the other is dealing with chronic irritable bowel syndrome. The couple also just had a baby last year and they have a pretty concerning debt-to-income ratio. I also know that they drove over 45 minutes from their address in the suburbs to attend church in Atlanta that morning. And then they checked out this market and bought a sweater. I watched a law enforcement officer and ambulance escort a man having a mental health crisis in Iowa. I know this because this is rapid blue.
I need to get back to my presentation. Sorry, this is, I don't have control over the interface here, so I can't advance it. Is there a keyboard that I can hit the button on? This is a full screen video. If I click it, it just, okay, here we go. Okay, so the fact, the amount of information these mass surveillance networks gather is deeply, deeply disturbing. This is all supposed to autoplay. It's not.
2 weeks ago, using a commercial search engine, I very easily found the administration interfaces for dozens of Flock safety cameras. I shared this information with 404 Media.
I think this is the same video, isn't it? Hang on.
None of the data or video footage was encrypted. There was no
I'm sorry, I'm having a really hard time with this because it's not playing the videos correctly.
You don't have to be an expert to find and
You'll be able to send it to us too if it gets too.
Yeah, you have a copy of this, but this sets up the argument that I'm going to make orally.
I am very salty and uncomfortable about something today. Something I've known
It skipped one of the videos. No, this skipped one of the videos. Hang
Are you
on.
looking at Ben Jordan? That's the YouTuber, Ben Jordan.
I have no control over the, can you go backwards? I don't have a keyboard. I don't have any ability to. Oh, there is. Okay, great, great. That would have been very helpful. All right, let's try this.
A few weeks ago, using a commercial search engine, I very easily found the administration interfaces for dozens of Flock safety cameras. I shared this information with 404 Media. media and with guns involved that number quickly grew to 70. None of the data or video footage was encrypted. There was no username.
Yeah, this is the same video. All right, let me skip to the next one.
You don't even have to type in.
So the thing that we're missing from that is just the detail of information that these cameras allow access to. All right, fact, third-party cameras handled by Flock are accessed by Flock and Axon employees and other parties who have absolutely no legal justification to surveil us or our children.
I am very salty and uncomfortable about something today. Something I've known about for a while, but I haven't really talked about that much, is that Flock Safety, who I assume needs no introduction at this point, works with third-party cameras, which means that if you owned a store and you installed this retail network surveillance camera in your parking lot, Flock will happily act as a middleman and ingest and aggregate the data from it. Stick with me, it's going to get a lot worse. Maybe you happen to see this video of me speaking at Dunwoody City Council 2 weeks ago. We could go to the nearest Falcon camera right now, and that's thanks to Jason Hunyar. Jason has been getting quotes and invoices in the millions of dollars just to be able to know what the police are searching on Flock cameras via open records requests. And when you see some of the information that he's dug up, you'll understand why he's not letting this go. So right off the bat, Flock is very clear about who is allowed to access footage and data in both their marketing materials and their contracts. For example, no unauthorized users, including Flock Safety employees, have access to the footage. Okay, well, a Dunwoody police officer by the name of Bob Carter searched the Flock database 63 times last year for all sorts of things like person on skateboard or yellow truck. But the problem is, Bob isn't a Dunwoody police officer. He's not a police officer at all. He's Flock's VP of Business Development and also a registered lobbyist. Also, according to public records, on September 30th of last year, this same Flock Safety employee logged on and accessed a camera in the gymnastics room of the MJCC in Dunwoody. And as it would turn out, Bob is not the only Flock employee that accessed these gym's cameras. Randy Gluck is also in the audit accessing these cameras on 3 separate occasions on 3 separate days. Between Flock employees, police officers, and names that I can't trace back to either organization, you can see the combined hours of these people watching strangers and children through this facility's cameras, including, but certainly not limited to, the pool, the fit line studio, and preschool daycare areas. And the bigger issue is that what we know is just a tiny fraction. The network is not adequately auditing who is accessing these systems and what they're doing with them. So let me ask you something. Are you okay with Flock employees or police?
I think you get the idea. All right, so there is no transparency. They are not honest about any of this. And there is no need for this in Asheville. And with that, I'm going to read the statement that I prepared. So the Real-Time Intelligence Center is a hub where Flock and its partners can access all camera footage, including camera footage from third-party commercial cameras handled by Flock. This would link us to the national mass surveillance network and enter us into a quid pro quo system of camera and data sharing between different government agencies that have no reasonable justification for surveilling us as we go about our daily lives. These agencies include ICE, the different branches of the military, the Secret Service, along with many small random agencies in other states that have no law enforcement purview at all. And this is not just license plate readers. This is an advanced network of AI-powered facial and object recognition cameras in public spaces, businesses, daycare centers, pools, gyms, etc. And this network is being used to watch people, including children, for non-law enforcement reasons, some of which are extremely malicious. And this cannot be emphasized enough. This nationwide network is not secure, and they are lying to us about that. In response to Ben Jordan's documented hacking of Flock systems, which we all just saw, Flock said our systems, our data, and our customers' data has never been hacked. They cannot be trusted. Even if these systems were secure, and even if the only people accessing them were law enforcement with legitimate business, there's absolutely no justification for this level of mass surveillance. Flock even quietly changed their terms of service, removing a line assuring customers that the company does not own and will not sell customer data. They removed that, including data from third-party cameras managed by Flock that are being accessed by Flock employees and God knows who else to spy on children. This mass surveillance network and all of the data from our lives is up for sale. It may seem like a lot of money for a small town, but $1 million is nothing to Flock. It is nothing to the Trump administration and its close ally Palantir. We realize you may see this as free money, but it's not. The cost is too great, and you cannot trust anything coming from the Trump administration and these utterly for-profit corporations in bed with them. So please, please say no to mass surveillance in Asheville.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Impeccable timing.
Yep. Sorry for the technical challenges, but we worked around it. Jen Hampton.
Ooh, take your time.
Wow, that was close. Hi. My name's Jen Hampton, and I wish you all a good evening as I try to find my speech. There we go. Like I said, my name's Jen Hampton. I'm the co-chair of Asheville Food and Beverage United and staff organizer for the Asheville Area Tenants Union. I wear a lot of hats in this community, but tonight I'm here as a very concerned citizen. I'm here to speak on the item that was item D, the mass surveillance system. I know that this has been going on for a while, but I must admit that it flew right by me until I saw the presentation at Nerd Night last week, and it really fired me up and terrified me. And I hope it terrifies y'all after seeing what Vaughn just presented. It seems like y'all buried this $1.1 million expansion of police surveillance in jargon, calling it a real-time intelligence center. But let's call it what it actually is. A centralized hub for spying on the people of Asheville, funded by far-right federal administration that has declared war on our most vulnerable neighbors. This council claims to be progressive, yet continue to collaborate with a fascist federal regime. Last year, you thanked Trump for drone surveillance. Now considering taking Chuck Edwards' money to build a network that will integrate personal cameras and business feeds into a surveillance web ready-made for ICE. We already know how APD uses technology. They've used drones to hunt the homeless population and surveil bookstores. While I'm sure that you all feel like this is about public safety, it's really not. It's about treating the public as the enemy. Furthermore, while words like slaughter have been used to describe the upcoming budget cuts to transit and essential services, I find it peculiar that we are somehow finding the long-term funds to maintain this bloated surveillance apparatus. At the February budget session, the public was clear: scale back the spying and save our services. Cities across this country are canceling contracts with Flock and dismantling surveillance because they actually care about protecting their community. Why is Asheville doubling down on draconian spying? Bearing this in the consent agenda was a deliberate choice. It is a choice to collaborate with federal fascism, and we have noticed. We see what is being done, and we urge you to please reject these funds and stop the expansion of the surveillance state in our city. Thank you.
Patrick Conant.
He didn't hear you.
I'm sorry, Patrick Conant.
Thank you, City Council. My name is Patrick Conant, and I live in East-West Asheville. I'm here to speak on the Real-Time Intelligence Center, and I want to start with what these systems actually are. The business model for Flock, Fusus, Axon, and the rest of these vendors is not public safety, it's data. The city lets them install cameras and license plate readers on our streets. In exchange, all those vendors get a 24/7 data set of resident behavior that they license, analyze, and use to train AI models. That's the trade. We, the people of Asheville, we're the product here. If you don't believe me, read the contract with any of these vendors. While we may own the data, they have a license to use it as well. On data sharing, I just want to highlight that APD has said they don't share data with ICE. But APD flock data is shared with more than 1,400 outside agencies, including Florida's Fish and Wildlife. And recent 404 media reporting shows Florida Fish and Wildlife shares that data directly with ICE. The "we don't share with ICE" promise is meaningless the moment the data leaves our network. This is the predictable result of our city's hands-off approach to surveillance tech. Here are the questions council should be answering before accepting this money. What is the ongoing operational cost after the grant runs out? Why are we accepting federal funds from Congressman Edwards to expand surveillance infrastructure in our city? And how will that affect our ability to refuse cooperation with federal immigration enforcement down the road? What capabilities will be enabled? Facial recognition, gunshot detection? The sheriff's office has disabled both at their center, but will the city do the same? And if that changes later, how would the public even know? What data sources will feed in? Is it the cameras, flock, Fusus? Is it more? We don't know. What footage is retained for how long and who gets access? I do want to note that APD's track record on transparency is a bit flawed. When we brought drones to our city, there was a promise. The flight logs will be on the open data portal. Here we are years later, it hasn't happened. I've helped try to fulfill a records request for audit logs of how flock is used. City won't release it. If we want to have these tools to solve public safety goals, we need to have a community conversation around what tools we use and how they're used. Please don't accept this grant. We need to take a step back. We need to actually have a community conversation around surveillance tech, get good information out there for everyone, and let's talk about what our community actually needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Canyon DeLuca?
Hello, everyone. So, where to start? I guess instead of slaughtering you with information and data and the tsunami of all of that is yet to come, because we will be back on this issue and we will not forget. So, I will talk to you from a different perspective. I was raised by police officers. My dad was a police officer, my uncle was a police officer, and one of the things that they taught me, or one of the things that my dad taught me when he was 21 years old, he moved to West Texas in a tiny little town. He came from New York City. He was a Yankee. He was an outsider. The police department he was a part of didn't want him there. And one of the things that he did that he told me was so important is that he joined the local baseball team. He got to know the community that he was protecting and serving. And I can tell you one thing, that drones, surveillance technology, centralization, all of that doesn't do that. I think that is the perspective that I want to bring, that it doesn't look good for y'all to go about this in the way that you are. I came here today thinking that it was just ignorance and misinformation and not understanding what was going on. Today, in this moment, I'm questioning if it's intentional. I don't really know, and I think that y'all should take that seriously. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Ethan Steele?
I'm a little nervous. In terms of, I'm here talking about the security and surveillance systems that were on item D. These flock safety cameras, I know that there are at least 2 that I know of that watch me when I go to work. At least 2 on the way, at least 2 on the way home. I'm concerned at the notion of investing further into this kind of constant surveillance for a few reasons. As highlighted earlier by some of the folks here, our policing being systemically enforced along racial lines, that's one of my issues. But an issue I'd like to raise that I want to speak specifically on is something that was talked about earlier. It was outlined pretty succinctly by a journalist from Dunwoody that was being highlighted, the city that was being highlighted in the video earlier there. It's a town in Georgia, and it signed a contract with Flock Safety last year. Jason Hunar, he writes that one Flock employee, Brandon Gluck, who we saw, who lives in Raleigh and is a business development manager for their 911 products, was granted live view access to our cameras, he says. Looked at 54 cameras with strange patterns, such as clicking through 5 traffic cameras on July 21st last year, before settling on the Dunwoody Library camera. The Flock data obtained through an audit does not tell us when he stopped watching that footage, only that he didn't look at anything else for at least 2 hours. 2 days later, Randy clicked through 3 private cameras at the JCC, the Jewish Community Center, before he settled on the JCC camera main pool right. It was over 3 hours later before his next view on a traffic camera. Randy is still an active user in our system. Jason continues. Bob Carter, Vice President of Strategic Relations on Business Development for Flock. Bob spends a lot of time looking through our live footage and recorded footage. Just since the beginning of last year, he has done this 185 times. Also, Bob has some interesting searches. On September 31st, 2025, Bob looked at one camera. This camera is in the gymnastics room of the JCC. I personally am curious at why the sales employee from Flock would be viewing the gymnastics room. He concludes the public deserves to know why Flock employees are using Dunwoody's Flock systems to look at live videos of people and children in the pool, gymnastic facilities, and fitness studios. That's the end of those quotes. Just since the start of 2025, 1,000, that's an old statistic, 1,400,
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis Justice.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Justice again. Thank you for having me. For a little bit lighter subject, I'm going to bring up pickleball. I want to thank the city of Asheville for having public input sessions at 3 different locations for pickleball courts. I started a group called Blue Ridge Pickleball in Henderson County, where I'm from. And it had to go away because I had work commitments, but the pickleball community has been trying to get dedicated courts in Henderson County, just like some people in the community here are trying to do so here in Asheville. I'm from Fletcher, and we had built 4 pickleball courts at the Billmore Community Park, the old Fletcher Community Park. Even though there's not tons of acreage there, there's only a very limited amount of land on there. So what they did is they made 4 smaller courts. And what I want to do is sow a seed in your mind in this process to look at the positive components of the complex in south of Atlanta, in Griffin, Georgia, and in Apellica, Alabama. Try to integrate things that could bring in sound deafening, maybe an overhead roof. But mainly when we talk about court size. Everybody wants to settle on 30 by 60 feet because it's like taking a tennis court and cutting it into 4 sections like it's a cake. I am admonishing you to look at the idea of bigger courts, particularly wider and longer courts, to help handicapped players. There are actually handicap regulations for pickleball. 36 by 66 feet would make it easier for wheelchair players to use those courts. It'd also be good for adaptive sports. If there was actually accommodations for players who receive kidney transplant or even a heart transplant, the handicapped players and the transplant players, they get 2 bounces instead of 1, but you need a bigger court for that. So I'm asking you to look at the idea of fewer courts, but better courts. And I will ask for you to look at this travel fund that I mentioned earlier tonight that the wine family would not apply for, or likely did not apply for. And look to your state leadership, because there's potential talk of expansion of gaming in the state of North Carolina, and I don't think we got our fair share in this region from sports ban. We got a couple of really good things, but we're not really getting our fair share and look for ways to improve your parks. And I want to say briefly to the pickleball community, and it's something to think about with your parks. Make sure your parks integrate the pickleball courts with the other things you offer that park. Because too many pickleball players just play pickleball. They need to be playing other sports. If you dedicate to one sport, you're going to get injured. You need to be looking at the other positive aspects of these potential parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica McLean.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Council. It's good to see y'all. I'm Jess McLean. I live in Oakley, and I work in Biscuit View Apartments, where my office is. So today I wanted to talk briefly about the role of the council and some of the stuff that I'm seeing as someone who works there every single day, who has for 5 years, that you might not know about, and that you'll know about, and I want to invite you to come and hang out with me and walk around sometime. So let's start with this. Poverty is violence. Poverty is violence. It sounds like we are concerned about violence. That's one reason to think about keeping an eye on people, increasing the presence of police force. We're interested in violence, and poverty is violence, and we have 15% of children in Asheville living in poverty. And the majority of folks living in poverty in Asheville are people of color. And a large amount of them live in our local housing communities. So our council is tasked as representatives to mitigate harm that our city can cause to our residents of this city. I would say that is a responsibility of council, to mitigate harm that can happen to residents as a result of our city and our city's systems. And unfortunately, here's some of the harm that I'm seeing. Increased poverty. We have recently had the Housing Authority of the City of Asheville also exit a memorandum of understanding or an agreement with an after-school program, leaving our youth and children nowhere to go necessarily until partners pick up the pieces, and they're partners that are doing that. But if we think about a pattern of events that are happening, we have an increased presence of APD. We have the idea of a real-time intelligence center coming together to surveil us. We have more students and youth who don't necessarily have somewhere to go where they would have otherwise accessed food and academic support, as well as enrichment and a safe place to be. We also have parents and caregivers and aunties and grandmas trying to figure out what they are going to do because they have to work, right? They had childcare before and they don't anymore. And largely this is happening in our housing communities where we have immense concentrations of poverty. And I'm just now realizing, after all this discussion has happened, that working in housing has probably put my car and my license plate on plenty of cameras that are accessed by folks all over this nation. I got a letter from Columbia University that I applied to 20 years ago saying that they had had a data breach. My social security number was out there. That came to my dad's house 2 weeks ago. I've had a team member, Black, pulled over 2 weeks ago. A neighbor, Black, pulled over today. And I kept an eye out while I was sitting outside of my office. It's a disturbing pattern, and I appreciate you asking good questions. Thank you.
Soren Peterson.
Hello, Council. 3 weeks ago, several cost of living adjustments to the city's compensation plan were presented as options to the City Council, with the most generous to low salaried employees being $22,000 a year, or roughly $1 an hour increase. While this was the best of the options presented, it is still woefully inadequate and fails to close the growing gap between city pay and local cost of living. As recently as 2019, city employees were making roughly $1,000 above a living wage, as defined by Just Economics. That took effort, but we got there because fair and just wages were made a priority by our city. But lack of maintenance and failure to keep up with local living factors, not just national inflation, have made it so that this year employees are now making $10,000 below a living wage. And because Asheville has gotten rid of every form of longevity and performance-based raises, even experienced longtime staff will see that gap grow if no additional adjustments are made. The cost burden of sub-living wage positions is expensive to workers, both financially and mentally, but it is also expensive to the city. It might not appear on a line item budget, or it might even look the opposite, where one less salary is saving the city money, but it costs us in the long term. We fix potholes, even though doing so costs money, because the decrease in maintenance of roads and the decrease in wear and tear on vehicles makes our roads safer and less expensive overall. The state has found that the state government pays $500 million a year in turnover costs. And clearly the city is not paying that same rate, but we are facing the same factors. In the private sector, they have found that hiring new positions for fired or vacant positions costs between 150 and 200% of a position's annual salary. And while I am not aware of a local study to that same effect, again, we still have those same things. I work as a laborer. My expectations are to lift 40 pounds and to communicate in English. But if I quit, or if the person before me quit, that means that someone who has the experience of serving their community, of knowing their other positions, of having the supervisor come in and oversee their hiring process is no longer there. And those supervisors have to take over positions rather than focus on the work that they are hired to do. It is a question of priorities, and I make two requests. First, for the departments that do not already do so, make exit interviews a common practice. We need to approach this with an informed position of what needs to be done. And second, make living wages a priority. Even if we don't get there this year, get us closer. We funded McCormick Field. That money was there. It was a good program, but we made a priority. And I asked you to do the same for workers. Thank you.
We don't have anyone else signed up to speak under public comment.
Lopez is right there. She's on the list.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just checked it. Was that just added?
You read her name. I don't know where it came from.
Yeah, maybe it got deleted accidentally.
Come on, let's do it.
Yes, sorry.
Nicole Lopez.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Oh, did I skip?
It's okay.
Oh,
Are you
it
ready for
somehow,
me?
I'm sorry. Anyway, correction, yes, thank you, please.
Okay, thank you. Hi, City Council. First, please ensure that access to records of City Council and committee meetings are preserved as you strive to meet ADA web compliance. Secondly, I come to you today as a technologist with over a decade of experience building software and securing organizations in the abortion access space, where we have long been concerned about the use of state and corporate surveillance systems being used to target and criminalize pregnant people, abortion patients, and people seeking gender-affirming care. Back in 2019, I was in a meeting with state lawmakers in Illinois who were seeking strategies to proactively ensure that the ALPR reader tech and other law enforcement tech would not be a tool for states with healthcare bans to criminalize people traveling to Illinois for care. As the only city in Western North Carolina with an abortion clinic, and as a regional haven for queer people in an increasingly criminalized environment, I wish that our local governance would take the same type of proactive and protective approach toward our own deployment of surveillance tech, like the second FUSIS Real-Time Intelligence Center that we're considering accepting funding for. Whenever building, deploying, or configuring new tech and systems, we should always be asking, how can this be used to harm people? How could this system be abused? Essentially, who can this harm and how? We already know that tech like this is being abused by law enforcement in abortion ban states trying to criminalize people accessing care, by ICE agents, and by abusers stalking their exes or others. We also know that sometimes the system gets it wrong. How do we know things like this? Typically, it's either because something has gone wrong or because of audits. It's worth mentioning that the city of Asheville has refused to release a network audit of our flock camera fleet that could have proven whether our network has been searched by unintended actors like rogue prosecutors tracking abortion clients. Having previously escalated concerns about FUSIS and flock to City Council, having reviewed the July 31st Public Safety Committee presentation by APD about their security approach to the policing tech like Axon, Flock, the drone program, and the most recent Public Safety Committee meeting that brought up the acceptance of this funding, I do not feel that y'all are asking sufficient questions to consider the potential harms of this tech. Why do we need another separate FUSA system for APD? I understand that APD already has access to the county FUSA system, but why is this access insufficient? We're essentially doubling our threat surface exposure. We now have 2 systems to secure that are only as secure as their weakest or most unethical users. 2 systems of potential for false hits and misuses. 2 systems to secure an audit now. Is this something that could be shared? It could be better addressed by a negotiation and a data sharing agreement and extra seats to the FUSA system so that we are still only dealing with 1 system? And is there a way for me as a citizen to know if facial recognition is going to be deployed by APD or Buncombe County? Now there are 2 entities where my data, where my face might be in a database or my car might be in a database. How is that being secured? Thank you.
Thank you. Apologize for that deletion there. All right, that now concludes the public comment for tonight. All right, council, we're adjourned. We're going to be back here on the 28th.
Thank you. I'll give it a good night.